Hello guys, welcome to Pika Fiction. So in this video, we will see what if Ash conquered the Masters 8 and claimed a harem of every region's female champion. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1, The Weight of the Crown. The roar was a physical thing, a wave of sound that vibrated through the steel and stone of Winden Stadium, pressing in on Ash from all sides. It was the collective voice of 100,000 people, a tidal wave of expectation and hope and raw, unadulterated passion. Across the scarred battlefield, Leon stood, a portrait of confident charisma, his cape stirring in the wind whipped up by the two titans facing each other in the center of the arena. His Charizard was a monster of flame and scale, its wingspan casting a dominant shadow, the fire on its tail burning with the heat of a star. Opposite him, Pikachu was a small, defiant spark of yellow. His breathing was ragged, his fur singed in places, one ear drooping with exhaustion. Ash could feel the tremor of fatigue running through his partner, a connection that went far beyond trainer and Pokémon. It was a shared current of life, a bond forged over 1,000 battles and 1,000,000 miles of road. He could feel Pikachu's exhaustion as if it were his own, a dull ache in his bones. But beneath it, he could also feel the stubborn, unquenchable fire that had always defined them. It was the fire of a promise made in the Pallet Town rain so long ago. It all comes down to this, Ash. Leon's voice boomed, amplified by the stadium speakers but carrying its own undeniable power. One final clash to decide it all. Are you ready to show me the full power of your bond? Ash didn't shout back. He didn't need to. The world seemed to narrow, the roar of the crowd fading into a distant hum. The only things that mattered were the field, the opponent, and the little yellow mouse who was looking back at him, eyes filled with an unwavering trust that still humbled him after all these years. He saw the slight dip in Charizard's left wing, the faintest flicker of fatigue in the rhythm of its breathing. Leon was a champion's champion, but his Pokémon was still a living creature. It had a limit. They just had to push it past that limit. "We're ready, Pikachu," Ash said, his voice quiet but clear, a private contract between the two of them. Pikachu's ears perked. Pikachu. The cry wasn't one of bravado, it was one of affirmation. "We're with you. Always. Then let's end this with a champion-time explosion." Leon roared, striking a dramatic pose. Charizard, G-Max Wildfire. The Dynamax band on Leon's wrist pulsed with crimson light. Energy swirled around Charizard, its form swelling, distorting, growing until it was a colossus that blotted out the sky. Its draconic features sharpened, its body became a living furnace, and its wings transformed into magnificent constructs of pure flame. The Gigantamax Charizard let out a roar that shook the very foundations of the stadium, a sound of apocalyptic power. "They're doing it. Leon's going for the kill," a commentator screamed from a booth high above. "Can Ash's Pikachu possibly withstand this?" Ash watched, his heart hammering against his ribs. He felt a strange calm settle over him. It wasn't the frantic, desperate energy of his earlier battles. It was something else. A clarity. He could see every variable, every potential outcome, laid out before him like a map. He had one shot. One Z move, the last dregs of their power, a gift from Professor Kukui and the people of Alola. It was all or nothing. "Let's go all out too, Pikachu." Ash yelled, his body moving with instinctual grace. He crossed his arms, tapping the Z-Power ring on his wrist. It pulsed with a brilliant, blinding light, a stark contrast to the crimson fury of Dynamax energy. "Our full power. Our whole journey." He began the familiar poses, a dance of power he knew by heart. But this time, it felt different. As he moved, he felt a warmth spreading from his chest, a golden energy that wasn't the Z-Ring's. It was his own. It flowed down his arms, through his hands, and into the air, weaving with the electric energy that was now sparking around Pikachu. Pikachu didn't just absorb the Z-power. He absorbed that other, warmer energy too. The golden light wrapped around him, soothing his fatigue, sharpening his focus. His small body became a capacitor for an impossible amount of power. The air crackled, the smell of ozone sharp and clean. Charizard, burn it all away. Leon commanded. The Gigantamax Charizard opened its maw and unleashed its signature move. It wasn't just a stream of fire, it was a phoenix forged from stellar plasma, an avatar of destruction that flew across the field, incinerating the ground it passed over. The heat washed over Ash in a staggering wave. Ash didn't flinch. His eyes were locked on Pikachu. Now. 10 million volt thunderbolt. He thrust his arm forward, a final, definitive motion. Pikachu became a comet. He shot into the air, a blur of yellow and gold, wrapped in a vortex of multicolored lightning. He didn't try to dodge the G-Max wildfire. He flew straight into it. For a terrifying second, Pikachu was completely engulfed by the fiery phoenix. The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath. Had he been incinerated? Then the phoenix exploded. It burst from within, shattered into a million embers by a furious storm of lightning. Pikachu emerged from the heart of the blast, not just unharmed, but supercharged. He was a living thunderbolt, a vessel of pure, untamed energy. He shot towards the Gigantamax Charizard, a tiny missile aimed at a giant. Leon's eyes widened in disbelief. Impossible. Pikachu struck the colossal Pokémon's chest. There was no sound at first, just a flash of white light so intense it bleached all color from the world. Then the sound hit, not the crack of thunder, but a deep, resonant boom that felt like a tear in the fabric of reality. The Gigantamax energy around Charizard flickered, destabilized, and then collapsed, the crimson light imploding in on itself. Charizard fell from the sky, shrinking back to its normal size as it crashed onto the field with a ground-shaking thud. It lay in a heap, smoke rising from its scales, swirls of electricity dancing harmlessly over its unconscious form. Silence. For a full 5 seconds, the stadium was utterly, profoundly silent. The world held its breath. The referee, a man who had officiated 1,000 matches, stared, his jaw slack, before he seemed to remember who and where he was. He raised his flag. Charizard is unable to battle. Which means the victory, and the title of monarch, goes to Ash Ketchum of Pallet Town. The silence shattered. The roar that came back was 1,000 times greater than before, a deafening, joyous explosion of sound. Confetti rained from the sky. The stadium lights flashed. On the giant screens, Ash's face was plastered, a stunned, breathless expression beneath the words, New World Monarch. Pikachu, spent, tumbled from the air. Ash ran, his legs pumping, and caught him before he hit the ground. The little Pokémon was limp, completely drained, but he managed a weak spark from his cheeks and a faint, triumphant, Pika. Ash hugged him tight, burying his face in the singed fur. We did it, buddy, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. We did it. He was swarmed. Leon was there first, clapping him on the back with a grin that was only slightly strained by the shock of his first-ever tournament loss. Ash, that was a battle for the ages. A true champion-time performance. Then came the officials, the camera crews, the dignitaries. Ash moved through it all in a daze, shaking hands, smiling for pictures, Pikachu a warm, exhausted weight in his arms. He was guided to the victor's podium. The former monarch, a stately, elderly man Ash didn't even know, presented him with the trophy, a magnificent golden cup. But that wasn't the real prize. The real prize was brought forward on a velvet cushion by Mr. Goodshow, the president of the Pokémon League Committee. It was a crown. Not a gaudy, jewel-encrusted thing, but a simple, elegant circlet of what looked like electrum, etched with subtle patterns that seemed to shift in the light. In the center, directly over the brow, was a single, stylized symbol, a sunburst with a lightning bolt at its heart. With this victory, you have earned the title of Monarch, the strongest trainer in the world, Mr. Goodshow announced, his voice resonating with historical gravity. May you wear this crown as a symbol of your strength and the bonds you share with your Pokémon. As he lowered the circlet onto Ash's head, a strange thing happened. The moment the cool metal touched his brow, Ash felt that same golden warmth from the battle, but 100 times stronger. It surged from the crown, a torrent of energy that flooded every cell in his body. For a split second, the world went gold. A visible shimmer of light, like heat haze on a summer road, washed out from him in a perfect circle. The cameras didn't pick it up. The cheering crowd didn't see it. But it was real. Every Pokémon in the stadium felt it. In the stands, trainers' Pokémon stirred in their Pokeballs. Down on the field, Leon's recovering Charizard opened an eye, its gaze drawn to Ash not with hostility, but with a primal, instinctual awareness. In Ash's arms, Pikachu's body went rigid, and a soft golden light glowed from his cheek pouches before fading. And in the champion's viewing box, one person saw it all. Cynthia, champion of the Sinnoh region, sat bolt upright. Her usual composed, almost ethereal demeanor was gone, replaced by a look of stark, intellectual alarm. Her grey eyes, which missed nothing, had been fixed on Ash the moment the crown was placed. She saw the shimmer. She saw the symbol on the crown, a symbol she had only ever seen in one place, a forbidden text deep in the archives of the Kanalave Library, a scroll that spoke of a power that predated Dialga and Palkia themselves. A power that was not supposed to exist in the modern world. No, she whispered, her hand instinctively going to the keystone around her neck. It can't be. Her Garchomp, standing sentinel behind her, let out a low growl, not of aggression, but of deep, earth-shaking unease. It, too, had felt the wave of power. Down on the podium, Ash blinked, the world swimming back into focus. The golden feeling receded, leaving behind a humming energy just beneath his skin, like a live wire. He felt more. His senses were sharper. He could hear individual conversations in the roaring crowd, smell the ozone from the battle hanging in the air, feel the subtle shift in air pressure as a flock of Corviknight flew high overhead. It was exhilarating. And it was terrifying. His moment of introspection was broken by a sudden, jarring silence. Not the respectful silence of before, but a dead, unnatural quiet. He looked up. In a triangular section of the stadium stands to his left, everything had stopped. The people were frozen mid-cheer. The confetti was suspended in mid-air. A man's hot dog was halfway to his mouth, a dollop of mustard hanging impossibly from its side. It was a perfect, silent tableau. Time itself had frozen in a 50-foot radius. Before anyone could process the sheer wrongness of it, a new sound cut through the air. A harsh, metallic screech. The flock of Corviknight that had been circling high above plummeted from the sky. They weren't flying, they were diving, like birds of prey, their armor-plated bodies aimed directly at the center of the field. Their eyes, usually intelligent and sharp, were glowing with a cold, vacant white light. They ignored their own trainers, who were shouting their names in confusion and panic. They ignored everything but the stage. Panic erupted. People screamed and scrambled away. Security guards rushed forward, sending out their own Pokémon. "Protect the Monarch," one of them yelled. Leon was already moving, his hand reaching for a Pokeball. "Ash, get back." But Ash didn't move. He felt no fear. He felt the cold, empty wrongness of the Corviknight, an energy that was the antithesis of the golden warmth humming inside him. He felt their mindless aggression, and another instinct, one he didn't know he possessed, rose to meet it. He didn't shout a command. He didn't send out a Pokémon. He took a single step forward, raising a hand. "Stop," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried a weight, a resonance that cut through the chaos. It was imbued with that golden, humming power. The word washed over the diving Corviknight like a physical force. They faltered. Their descent slowed, their wings beating erratically. The lead Corviknight, a massive specimen just feet from the stage, pulled up sharply, its screech turning from one of aggression to one of confusion. The white light in its eyes flickered. It looked at Ash, not as a target, but as a presence. An authority. One by one, they broke off their attack, circling in confusion before landing haphazardly around the field, the vacant light in their eyes receding, replaced by their normal, intelligent gaze. They shook their heads as if waking from a dream, looking around at the chaos they had caused. Simultaneously, the frozen section of the stadium lurched back into motion. The confetti fell, the man ate his hot dog, and the crowd's cheer finished, albeit now mixed with screams of terror and confusion. The entire incident had lasted less than 30 seconds. Ash stood with his hands still outstretched, breathing heavily. The hum of power inside him had dimmed, and he felt a sudden, profound exhaustion, deeper than any battle had ever left him. What had he just done? Leon stared at him, his hand frozen on his pokeball. The security guards had stopped in their tracks. Up in the stands, Cynthia was on her feet, her face pale. She wasn't looking at the Corviknight or the recovering crowd. She was looking at Ash, at the boy who had just commanded a flock of crazed Pokémon to stand down with a single word. She knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that the world had just changed. And Ash Ketchum, the newly crowned monarch, was standing at the epicenter of it all. The penthouse suite of the Rose of the Rondlands Hotel was a palace of glass and steel, offering a panoramic view of Wyndon's glittering skyline. Distant sirens wailed through the night, a constant reminder of the bizarre incident that had marred the end of the tournament. The official story being pushed by the league was a mass hallucination event, a combination of stadium light strobing and crowd hysteria. A weak explanation, but one designed to prevent worldwide panic. Ash stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, not looking at the view, but at the chaos below. He'd been separated from his friends, Go, Chloe, even Brock and Misty who had come to watch, and whisked away by a grim-faced league security team. They'd called it protective custody. It felt more like a gilded cage. Pikachu was asleep on the king-sized bed, curled into a tight ball, his rest deep and absolute. Ash's other Pokémon were in their Pokeballs on the nightstand, all of them having been given a clean bill of health by a worried Nurse Joy, who couldn't explain the strange energy readings she'd gotten from all of them. He felt a deep, thrumming exhaustion that sleep wouldn't touch. He kept replaying the moment in his mind. The feeling of the golden power, the instinctive command, the way the Corviknight had just obeyed. It was more disturbing than their attack. It felt like he had reached into their minds and bent them to his will. He lifted a hand, turning it over in the dim light of the room. It was just a hand. Calloused from his journey, scarred in a few places. But it didn't feel like his own anymore. Nothing did. The crown sat on a polished mahogany desk across the room, its simple design seeming to mock the complexity of the situation. The weight of it, he was beginning to realize, wasn't in the metal. A soft chime came from the door. "Go away," Ash said, his voice flat. He wasn't in the mood for another league official with a clipboard and a list of questions they didn't want the real answers to. The door chimed again, more insistent this time. A moment later, there was the soft beep of a keycard reader, and the door slid open. Ash tensed, turning from the window, ready for a fight. Cynthia stepped into the room. She wasn't in her usual champion attire. She wore a simple, elegant black trench coat over dark slacks, her blonde hair tied back. She looked less like a Pokémon champion and more like a scholar or a detective, which, Ash was beginning to learn, was a far more accurate description of who she was. Her expression was unreadable, but her gray eyes were sharp, analytical, and fixed solely on him. "The security detail outside is very dedicated," she said, her voice calm and low as the door slid shut behind her. "They were quite insistent that you were not to be disturbed." "How did you get in?" Ash asked, his posture still defensive. A faint, wry smile touched her lips. "I have a higher clearance level." And Garchomp can be very persuasive without saying a word. She took a few steps into the room, her gaze sweeping from the crown on the desk to Ash by the window. She stopped, maintaining a respectful distance. I'm not here as a league official, Ash. I'm not here to ask you about mass hysteria. Ash's shoulders slumped slightly. Then why are you here, Cynthia? I'm here because I saw what happened, she said, her voice losing its wry edge, becoming serious. Not the Corviknight attack. Not the time distortion. I saw what happened when they put that crown on your head. He said nothing, just watched her, his heart rate picking up again. I saw the wave of energy, she continued, her eyes never leaving his. And I saw you command those Pokémon to stand down. That wasn't a trainer's command. That wasn't a talent for connecting with Pokémon. That was something else. Something older. She walked over to the desk and looked down at the crown, but didn't touch it. Do you know what that symbol is? She asked, pointing a manicured finger at the sunburst and lightning bolt. The monarch's crest, I guess, Ash said. It is, she confirmed. But the title of monarch wasn't invented for this tournament. That is a name, and a symbol, that dates back to the dawn of history. Before the regions had names, before the Pokémon League even existed. The stories are obscure, mostly relegated to myth. Most consider them fairy tales. She finally turned to face him fully, her expression grim. The stories tell of a human who could, through a combination of an indomitable will and a profound connection to the world, become a living conduit for its life force. They called this energy aura, but it was a different kind than the abilities of a Lucario or a guardian of aura. It was the aura of the planet itself. This person was not a king who ruled people. They were a pillar of reality. The monarch. Ash felt a cold knot form in his stomach. The word aura snagged his attention. He remembered his training with Riolu, the feeling of sensing the life force of others. This felt like that, but magnified by a billion. What are you trying to say? He asked, though he was afraid he already knew. I'm saying that you didn't just win a trophy, Ash, Cynthia said, her voice barely a whisper. When you defeated Leon, when your bond with Pikachu reached a peak so high it bordered on the supernatural, you fulfilled the final condition of an ancient rite. You didn't win the title of monarch. You became the monarch. She let the words hang in the air, heavy and unbelievable. Ash just stared at her, his mind reeling. A pillar of reality? An ancient rite? It sounded like something out of one of the fantasy movies he and Go watched. It couldn't be real. That's crazy, he said, shaking his head. I'm a trainer. I'm from Pallet Town. Are you? Cynthia challenged, her gaze unwavering. A boy from Pallet Town who has befriended more legendary and mythical Pokémon than any 10 researchers have documented. A trainer who has consistently found himself at the center of world-altering events and emerged not just intact, but stronger. A man who just stopped a rampage with a single word. She had a point. He couldn't deny his life had been anything but normal. But this was on another level entirely. That crown wasn't just a trophy, she went on, gesturing to the circlet. It was a catalyst. An amplifier. It focused your potential and unlocked what was already there, dormant. The power you felt, that golden light, that was the aura of the monarch. And its sudden re-emergence into the world is the reason this city is in a state of controlled panic. He remembered the frozen tableau, the vacant-eyed Pokémon. The anomaly. You think I caused that? The thought made him sick. Not directly, she corrected, her tone softening slightly. Think of reality as a still pond. Your ascension, the awakening of this immense power, was like dropping a massive boulder into the center of it. The ripples are what you saw today. Distortions in space and time. Living creatures momentarily having their connection to the world severed, leaving them empty, suggestible. She paused, and a flicker of genuine fear crossed her features. Those ripples will attract things, Ash. Things that live in the deep, dark parts of the pond. Things that prey on instability. The legends call it by many names. The silence. The unraveling. The great correction. It is a cosmic force of balance that perceives your new power not as a miracle, but as a dangerous anomaly. A cancer on reality that must be excised. Ash walked slowly towards the desk, his legs feeling like lead. He looked at the crown, this simple band of metal that had apparently upended his entire world. He reached out a hand, hesitating just above its surface. He could feel it. A faint warmth, a gentle hum, a promise of incredible power. So what happens now? He asked, his voice low. What does this thing want? It wants to erase you, Cynthia said, the words blunt and brutal. It wants to restore the balance by removing the source of the imbalance. It will start with small things, like today. Unexplained phenomena. Pokemon acting unnaturally. But it will grow. It will become more direct. More intelligent. And it will not stop until your power is either sealed away or extinguished completely. He finally looked away from the crown and met her eyes. He saw no deception there, only a grave, terrifying sincerity. He believed her. As insane as it sounded, he believed every word. It was the only thing that made sense of the day's events, of the feeling humming in his veins. For a long moment, the only sound was the distant wail of the sirens. Ash felt the weight of it all settle on his shoulders. He had finally achieved his dream. He was the strongest trainer in the world. And it had put a target on his back for an enemy he couldn't even see, a threat to the entire world he loved. The irony was so bitter it almost made him laugh. He looked at Pikachu, sleeping peacefully, and felt a surge of protectiveness so fierce it burned. He thought of his mother, Professor Oak, all his friends and rivals. They were all living on that placid pond Cynthia had described. And he was the boulder that was about to bring the monsters. No. He wouldn't let that happen. His expression hardened. The confusion and fear were still there, but something else was crystallizing underneath it. Resolve. He had faced down criminal organizations, saved legendary Pokemon, and averted apocalypses before. This was different, bigger, but the principle was the same. You don't run. You don't hide. You stand and you fight for what you care about. Okay, he said, the single word cutting through the quiet tension. Cynthia raised an eyebrow. Okay. Okay, he repeated, turning to face her fully. He wasn't the dazed, overwhelmed boy from the stadium anymore. His eyes were clear and focused. So I'm the monarch. And something is coming to hunt me, and it's going to tear up the world to get to me. So we have to stop it. He wasn't asking. He was stating a fact. A slow smile spread across Cynthia's face. It was the first genuine, unguarded expression he had seen from her all night. It was a smile of relief and profound respect. This was the Ash she had seen in the legends, the indomitable will. She echoed softly. You just met me under these circumstances, and you're already including me in your plans? You're the one who knew what was happening, Ash said simply. You came here to warn me. That tells me you're not going to just stand by and watch. So, yeah. Unless you have a prior engagement. She chuckled, a low, pleasant sound. No. I believe my schedule just cleared indefinitely. The legends of the monarch don't just speak of the threat he faces. They also speak of how he faces it. He doesn't do it alone. He gathers allies. The strongest, the wisest, the bravest. He forms a court, an aegis to shield the world. She looked at him, her gray eyes seeming to hold the weight of all the history she had studied. Our work begins now, Your Majesty. The title sounded strange, formal, but he understood the sentiment behind it. It wasn't about subservience. It was an acknowledgement of the role he had been thrust into. Ash walked back to the window, the conversation with Cynthia replaying in his mind. He was no longer just Ash Ketchum, trainer. He was the monarch. He looked down at his reflection in the dark glass, at the familiar face he'd seen a million times. But this time, something was different. Faintly, almost imperceptibly, he could see it. A soft, golden light swirling deep within his pupils. The energy of the world, looking back at him. He had won the Masters 8. He had achieved his lifelong dream. And his greatest battle had just begun. Chapter 2, The Colossian Gambit. The silver gleam of the high-speed train was a blur against the verdant countryside of northern France. Inside, the first-class cabin was a cocoon of quiet luxury, all brushed aluminum and plush blue velvet. It was a world away from the dusty roads and crowded Pokémon centers that had been Ash's home for most of his life. He sat staring out the window, watching trees and fields streak by, but his focus was turned inward. In his lap, Pikachu was nibbling on a small piece of puffin Cynthia had produced from her bag, a rare and complex treat she apparently kept on hand. Ash, however, was trying to meditate. Or at least, what he thought was meditation. He was trying to find the golden hum, the live wire of power that had settled beneath his skin since the tournament. He closed his eyes, focusing on his breathing. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, he reached for it. He didn't know how, but he just did. A familiar warmth bloomed in his chest, spreading through his limbs. It was comforting, like the first rays of sun after a cold night. But it was wild, untamed. He could feel its immense potential, a wellspring of energy that made Pikachu's strongest thunderbolt feel like a static spark. Trying to control it was like trying to hold water in his fist. The harder he squeezed, the more it slipped through his fingers. He felt a faint probe against his consciousness, a gentle, structured thought that wasn't his own. Don't try to command it. Coax it. It's a part of you now, not a tool you wield. Ash's eyes snapped open. Cynthia was sitting opposite him, a datapad resting on her lap, but her gray eyes were on him, a hint of amusement in their depths. Did you just talk in my head? Ash asked, feeling a fresh wave of disorientation. A rudimentary form of telepathy, she confirmed, her tone matter-of-fact. A common side effect for those with a high-level aura sensitivity. It seems your monarch power is acting as a passive amplifier for abilities you already possessed. I was merely thinking loudly in your direction. The fact that you heard it so clearly is illuminating. Ash rubbed his temples. Telepathy. On top of everything else. So you can just read my mind now. Not at all, she reassured him. It's more like hearing a shout from the next room. It's intrusive, and I apologize. But you were wrestling with the aura like a rookie trying to tame a Gyarados. I felt the need to intervene before you gave yourself a migraine. She gestured with a graceful hand. The monarch's aura isn't an external power source like a Z-ring. It's the life force of the world, channeled through you. You are the conduit. Think of it less like a muscle to be flexed and more like a current to be guided. Guided where? Ash asked, the frustration evident in his voice. He felt like he'd been given the keys to the world's fastest race car but didn't know how to drive a stick shift. For now, just let it settle. Feel its ebb and flow. Your body and spirit need to acclimate. Pushing too hard, too fast, is what creates ripples, she said, her expression turning serious. Ripples. Like the frozen time in the stadium. Like the crazed Corviknight. The official reports from Winden were a masterclass in obfuscation. The league committee had sealed all records of the event, citing national security, and the official story about strobing lights was already being torn apart by independent journalists. The chaos was being contained, but barely. The information we're getting from the league is becoming more fragmented, Cynthia said, tapping her data pad. Reports of minor incidents, sudden power outages in Shalar City, unusually aggressive wild Pokémon near the Kalos power plant, are being classified and buried almost as soon as they're filed. Someone is actively suppressing the data. Why would they do that? Ash asked. Don't they want to stop this? Panic is a more dangerous contagion than any virus, Cynthia mused. The committee's primary function is to maintain order. They see these events as isolated problems to be managed, not symptoms of a single, world-ending disease. Admitting the truth would shatter the public's faith in the very systems designed to protect them. She paused, a thoughtful frown on her face. Or, someone high up understands exactly what's happening and is helping it along. The thought was chilling. A traitor within the League itself. Which is why we're going to see Diantha, Ash finished for her, grasping the thread of her logic. We need allies with power, but outside the official channels. Precisely, Cynthia confirmed. Diantha is more than the Colosian champion. She's a beloved international celebrity. Her influence extends far beyond the battlefield, into politics, media, and finance. If she stands with us, she provides a legitimacy we cannot hope to achieve on our own. But she's not going to just believe a crazy story about ancient myths and reality-eating monsters, Ash surmised. She is a pragmatist, wrapped in the guise of a dreamer, Cynthia said. She will need more than stories. She will need proof. The train's automated voice announced their imminent arrival in Lumio City. Ash looked out the window again. In the distance, the magnificent prism tower pierced the clouds, a beacon of progress and modernity. But as he looked, he felt a subtle wrongness emanating from the city ahead. It wasn't something he could see or hear. It was a feeling, a cold spot in the warm hum of the world's aura. It felt like a sliver of ice in his soul. The null, he thought, the name Cynthia had given the entity resonating with a cold dread. It's already here. Lumio City was a city holding its breath. The usual vibrant energy of the Colosian capital was muted, replaced by a palpable tension. The streets were less crowded, the famous cafes quieter. There was a noticeable increase in the number of officer jennies patrolling the grand boulevards, their menectric trotting beside them with a nervous energy. Giant screens mounted on the sides of buildings, which usually showed fashion ads or battle highlights, were now dominated by the face of one man, Councilman Alastair Gerard. He was handsome in a severe, manufactured way, with silver-streaked dark hair and a jaw that looked like it had been carved from granite. He spoke with a practiced, reasonable tone that made the fear-inducing words he used sound all the more insidious. Another incident last night near the Lumios Museum, Gerard was saying, his image broadcast on a screen the size of a building. A trainer's Pyroar, a Pokémon raised from a Litleo, suddenly turned on its owner, causing significant property damage before it could be subdued. These are not isolated events. They are a pattern. The League's inaction forces my hand. The Pokémon Control and Public Safety Act is not a suggestion, it is a necessity to protect the citizens of Kalos. The broadcast cut to a graphic of the proposed act, outlining strict new regulations, mandatory psychological profiling for powerful Pokémon, limits on which species could be owned by private citizens, expanded authority for law enforcement to confiscate Pokémon deemed a public risk. It was a cage, disguised as a shield. He's using the chaos, Ash said, watching the broadcast with a knot in his stomach. He's weaponizing fear, Cynthia corrected, her eyes narrowed. And he's doing it brilliantly. Every new incident the null causes is another point in his favor. He's creating a political feedback loop that will end with him having unprecedented power over the trainers of this region. They made their way to a discreet hotel just off the Avenue d'Automne, where Diantha had agreed to meet them. They were led not to a suite, but to a private cinema room in the hotel's basement, a place with no windows and soundproofed walls. Diantha was waiting for them. The Colosian champion was the very picture of grace, dressed in a stylish white pantsuit, her raven black hair falling perfectly around her shoulders. But Ash's newly honed senses picked up what a camera would miss, the faint tension in her jaw, the way her fingers subtly toyed with the mega charm on her choker. Standing beside her, perfectly still, was her Gardevoir, its elegant form exuding an aura of calm that seemed to be the only thing holding the room's anxious energy at bay. "Cynthia." "Ash," Diantha said, her voice the same smooth, melodic tone the world knew from her films. "Thank you for coming. I apologize for the clandestine nature of this meeting, but as you can see, Lumiose is on edge." "We understand completely, Diantha," Cynthia said, inclining her head respectfully. "The situation is more serious than the public knows." "I'm beginning to suspect that myself," Diantha admitted, her gaze shifting to Ash. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and held a deep-seated weariness. "Champion, or monarch, I should say. Congratulations on your victory. Though it seems your celebration was short-lived." Suddenly, Gardevoir took a half-step forward, its head tilting. Its pink eyes fixed on Ash, not with hostility, but with intense, overwhelming curiosity. A soft chime echoed in the room, a psychic resonance that made Ash's teeth ache. He felt the Pokémon's mind gently brush against his, like a feather. It wasn't trying to enter, just to sense the shape of the power he held. The golden hum inside him flared in response, a warm pulse of acknowledgement. Gardevoir's eyes widened, and it took a half-step back, bowing its head slightly in a gesture of profound respect. Diantha stared, astonished. "My Gardevoir has never reacted that way to anyone. It can sense the truth of a person's heart, their emotional state." "What did it just see in you, Ash?" "The truth of the situation," Cynthia answered for him. She then proceeded to lay out everything, the legend of the monarch, the awakening of Ash's power, the nature of the null, and the incidents they were seeing as the first ripples of its influence. Diantha listened with perfect, unbroken attention. She didn't interrupt, didn't scoff. When Cynthia was finished, a long silence filled the room. Diantha walked over to a small table and poured 3 glasses of water, her movements deliberate and controlled. "A cosmic immune system," she said finally, handing glasses to Ash and Cynthia. "A corrective force seeking to erase an anomaly. And you," she looked at Ash, "are the anomaly." She took a sip of water. As a script, it would be rejected as being too fanciful. And yet, she trailed off, her gaze distant. "It's the only theory that fits the facts. The randomness of the events, the specific nature of the temporal and behavioral distortions, they defy conventional explanation." She placed her glass down, her composure finally cracking to reveal the immense pressure she was under. "This Councilman Gerard, he's a political shark who smells blood in the water. Every time a Pokémon has one of these episodes, his poll numbers rise. My office is being flooded with demands that I, as champion, endorse his Public Safety Act. The League Committee is pressuring me to work with him to restore public confidence." Her eyes narrowed. "The pressure is coming from one source in particular, the head of the tournament sanctioning board. He's always been a pragmatist, but this is different. He's adamant that Gerard's solution is the only path forward. It feels orchestrated." Cynthia and Ash exchanged a look. The mole. He wasn't just suppressing data, he was actively pushing a political agenda that capitalized on the null's chaos. "I am trapped, Cynthia," Diantha confessed, her voice losing its public grace and becoming raw. "If I fight Gerard, I'm seen as opposing public safety. If I endorse him, I betray every trainer in Kalos. My power as champion is useless if the people I'm meant to protect turn against me. So we give you a third option," Ash said, speaking for the first time. Diantha turned to him, an eyebrow raised. "Oh. And what is that?" "We changed the narrative," Ash said, his voice gaining a confidence that surprised even himself. He felt the rightness of the path forward, a clear line through the tangled mess of politics and fear. Gerard's power comes from painting these Pokémon as monsters. He's showing the public a problem and offering a cage as the solution. We need to show them the real problem, and offer a cure instead." "A cure?" Diantha asked, skeptical. You can cure a cosmic entity's influence? I don't know, Ash admitted honestly. But at the stadium. I didn't hurt those Corviknight. I just calmed them. The golden energy, it felt like it pushed the coldness out. I think I can do more than just command. I think I can cleanse. A spark of hope flickered in Diantha's eyes, but it was quickly tempered by pragmatism. Even if you can, how do you propose to demonstrate this? A private demonstration won't sway public opinion. Gerard is holding a rally in the Place Rouge this evening, Ash said, recalling the news broadcast. He's planning a public safety demonstration. He'll have a Pokémon there. One that he'll claim is dangerously unstable. Understanding dawned on Cynthia's face. Oh, that is a gambit. Diantha stared at him, catching on. You intend to interrupt his rally? In front of the entire city's media. He'll have security everywhere. They'll arrest you. They'll try, Ash said, a small, determined smile on his face. He looked at Pikachu, who had finished his poffin and was now perched on his shoulder, cheeks sparking with readiness. Gerard wants a public demonstration of a Pokémon's danger. We'll give him a public demonstration of a Pokémon's salvation. Diantha looked from Ash's unwavering, confident gaze to Cynthia's approving smile, and then to her own Gardevoir, who was watching Ash with an expression of complete faith. For the first time in weeks, the champion of Kalos felt the suffocating weight on her shoulders begin to lift. The Place Rouge is a historical landmark, she said, a hint of her own dramatic flair returning to her voice. Causing a scene there carries a heavy penalty. A slow, dangerous smile spread across her face. If you're going to do this, you cannot afford to fail. You will need a distraction. Something to draw the attention of Gerard's security detail at the critical moment. She picked up her data pad. I believe, she said, her fingers dancing across the screen, I can arrange for a sudden, citywide test of the emergency broadcast system. A very loud one. Evening descended on Lumio City, painting the sky in shades of orange and violet. The Place Rouge was a sea of people and lights. Gerard's rally was in full swing, a masterpiece of political theater. Banners bearing his face and the slogan, "Safety through Strength," hung from every lamppost. He stood on a brightly lit stage, Prism Tower a glittering jewel behind him, his powerful voice echoing across the square. Ash stood on the periphery of the crowd, hood pulled up, Pikachu concealed within his jacket. Cynthia was a few yards away, a chameleon in the throng, while Diantha was monitoring everything from a mobile command center, a black van parked 2 streets over. And now, we will show you why this act is so vital. Gerard announced, gesturing dramatically. Bring it out. A heavy-duty containment cage was wheeled onto the stage. Inside, a Bisharp paced back and forth, its bladed arms gleaming under the spotlights. It was a magnificent specimen, but there was something horribly wrong with it. Its movements were jerky, unnatural. Its eyes, which should have been sharp and intelligent, glowed with the same cold, vacant white light Ash had seen in the Corviknight. A low, guttural growl emanated from it, a sound of mindless rage. This Bisharp belongs to one of our city's finest trainers, Gerard said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. But 2 nights ago, it attacked him without provocation. It no longer recognizes him. It is a weapon without a master. A tragedy. He pointed at the cage. This is the new reality we face. A danger that can lurk within any Pokémon. The crowd murmured, a wave of fear and uncertainty spreading through them. Ash could feel it, a sour tang in the air. He could also feel the Bisharp's state. It wasn't just anger. It was pain. Confusion. A consciousness trapped and drowning in a cold, empty void. The Null's touch was a spiritual poison, and this Pokémon was in agony. The trainer, a young man with a terrified expression, was brought on stage. Try to calm him, Gerard instructed, a setup for failure. Blade, the trainer called out, his voice shaking. Blade, it's me. Listen to me. The Bisharp reacted by slamming against the bars of its cage, the metal groaning under the impact. The trainer flinched back. The crowd gasped. Gerard's expression was one of grim satisfaction. His point was being made for him. Now, Ash, Diantha's voice came, crisp and clear, through a hidden earpiece. As if on cue, every public screen in the city flickered. Gerard's face was replaced by a stark civil emergency symbol. A piercing, high-frequency tone blared from speakers across the city, a sound designed to command immediate attention. "What is this?" Gerard shouted, thrown off his rhythm. His security detail, a squad of men in black suits, turned their attention towards the sudden, citywide alert, trying to identify the source. That was the opening. "Let's go, buddy," Ash whispered. He moved. Not with the frantic energy of a teenager, but with the fluid economy of a seasoned predator. He slipped through the disoriented crowd, a ghost making his way to the stage. People were too busy looking at the screens and covering their ears to notice the hooded figure vaulting over the security barrier. He landed on the stage just as the emergency tone cut out. The sudden silence drew every eye to him. Gerard stared, his mouth agape. The security team spun around, shouting, reaching for poke balls. "Who are you?" "Seize him," Gerard commanded. Ash ignored them. He pulled back his hood, revealing his face. A wave of recognition rippled through the crowd. It was the new monarch. Pikachu leaped from his jacket onto his shoulder, cheeks crackling. "You're wrong, Councilman," Ash said, his voice amplified by the stage microphone, clear and steady. "That Bisharp isn't a weapon. It's sick. And you're trying to exploit its pain for your own gain. Lies. He's a radical, trying to disrupt our safety." Gerard retorted, recovering quickly. "He's proving my point. Trainers think they are above the law." Two security guards rushed the stage, their Pokémon, a pair of powerful Mach-Hoke, materializing beside them. Ash didn't even look at them. He kept his eyes on the raging Bisharp. "Pikachu, use Electro-Web. Don't hurt them, just stop them." Pikachu shot into the air, spinning rapidly. A net of crackling electricity shot out, not aimed at the Mach-Hoke, but at their feet. The web stuck to the stage floor, a sticky, electrified barrier. The Mach-Hoke and their trainer stumbled to a halt, unable to advance without getting a serious shock. Ash was already moving, his hand on the cage's release lever. "No, don't," the young trainer cried out in terror. "It'll kill you." Ash looked at him, and for a second, the trainer saw the golden light flash in his eyes. "Trust me." He threw the lever. The cage door sprang open. The Bisharp burst out, a blur of dark steel and mindless fury. It didn't hesitate. It charged straight for Ash, its arm blades raised, aiming a killing blow. Ash stood his ground. He didn't reach for a pokeball. He didn't brace for impact. He reached for the golden hum inside him. "Guide it," Cynthia's voice echoed in his memory. He didn't try to force it. He coaxed it, nurtured it, drawing the warm energy from his core. He held out his hand, not in a defensive posture, but an open, inviting one. The air around him shimmered with a faint golden light. He could feel the cold, jagged edges of the null's influence radiating from the Bisharp, and he focused his own aura to meet it, not as a sword, but as a solvent. "Pikachu," Ash said, his voice calm. "Thunderbolt. Gentle. Match my energy." It was a command that would have made no sense to any other trainer. But Pikachu understood perfectly. He leaped onto Ash's outstretched arm, a conduit for his will. He didn't unleash a devastating blast. Instead, a soft, warm stream of golden electricity flowed from his cheeks. It wasn't a weapon. It was an embrace. The electricity wrapped around the charging Bisharp, and it carried Ash's monarch aura with it. The Bisharp's furious charge faltered. It stumbled, the killing blow going wide. The white light in its eyes flickered violently. It let out a screech, but this one wasn't of rage. It was of pain and confusion, like a man waking from a nightmare. The golden energy pulsed, washing over it, sinking past its steel armor to the spiritual sickness beneath. It felt like an eternity, but it was only a few seconds. The cold, vacant light in the Bisharp's eyes dissolved, replaced by the sharp gleam of its natural intelligence. It stopped, standing unsteadily a few feet from Ash. It looked at its own bladed hands, then at its trainer, who was staring in wide-eyed disbelief. It let out a soft, questioning cry. Sharp. It was no longer a monster. It was just a Pokémon. A profound silence fell over the Place Rouge. The crowd, Gerard, the security, the young trainer, everyone stared, utterly speechless. They had not witnessed a battle. They had witnessed a miracle. The young trainer was the first to move. Blade, he whispered, taking a hesitant step forward. The Bisharp turned to him, and with a cry of recognition, it rushed past Ash and into its trainer's arms, the man sobbing with relief as he hugged his partner. Ash lowered his arm, a wave of dizziness washing over him. Channeling the aura so precisely had taken a toll. He leaned on Pikachu for a moment, his breath catching. The narrative was shattered. Gerard's foundation of fear had been demolished in a single, compassionate act. The councilman's face was a mask of fury and disbelief. He had lost control. The cameras, which had been broadcasting his message of fear across the region, were now broadcasting Ash's message of hope. "He's not a danger," Ash said into the microphone, his voice still carrying across the now silent square. "None of them are. They're scared. They're sick. And what they need isn't a cage. It's help." Before anyone could react, Cynthia moved. She appeared at the side of the stage, her Garchomp materializing beside her with a ground-shaking thud that made the security guards freeze. "Ash, it's time to leave." Ash nodded. He gave one last look at Gerard's apoplectic face before turning and disappearing into the chaos with Cynthia, Garchomp's intimidating presence covering their retreat. They were back in the van before the city's police force could even properly mobilize. Diantha was at the communications console, a brilliant, triumphant smile on her face. The live feed on her screen showed the Place Rouge, where the crowd was no longer scared, but buzzing with excitement and debate. Gerard was being swarmed by reporters, but they weren't asking about his act. They were asking about Ash Ketchum. That, Diantha said, turning to face him as he climbed into the van, was the most brilliant and reckless piece of public theater I have ever witnessed. You didn't just win a battle. You won the hearts and minds of my entire region. She stood up, her posture no longer weary, but filled with a renewed sense of purpose. My resources, my political capital, my influence, they are yours. The League Committee may want to hide this, but we will not. We will build our own organization, a clandestine response team operating in the shadows. Your Aegis, as Cynthia called it. She looked at Ash, her eyes shining with respect and something more, a shared sense of destiny. You have proven yourself, Monarch. Not just with power, but with a wisdom and compassion I did not expect. Ash just nodded, still catching his breath. He had his first true ally. A champion. A queen. The null's influence seems to be concentrating, Cynthia said, looking at a map on Diantha's console that was now populated with dozens of data points Diantha had unclassified. The incidents aren't random. Wyndon, Lumiose, both have histories tied to immense energy. The ultimate weapon in Kalos, the Galar particles. Now, look at this. She pointed to a new cluster of reports, a hotspot of red dots forming on the other side of the world. Unova, Diantha breathed. And the epicenter appears to be Dragon Spiral Tower. Ash looked at the map. He remembered the tower, a place of ancient legend, home to Zekrom and Harem. A place of immense draconic power. A place that would be a beacon for the null. And a place under the protection of a champion as wild and untamable as the dragons she commanded. Iris, Ash said, the name a statement of their next objective. He knew this next recruitment wouldn't be won with a political gambit or a public miracle. To convince the Dragon Master of Unova, they would need to speak her language, the language of raw, untamed power. Chapter 3, The Dragon's Roar. The world viewed from 40,000 feet was an abstract painting of blue and white. Ash sat in a leather seat that was more comfortable than any bed he'd ever owned, staring through the triple-paned glass of the private jet's window. The aircraft, a sleek, arrow-headed machine chartered by Diantha's production company, cut through the upper atmosphere with a barely perceptible hum. It was a far cry from the cramped cargo holds of transport planes or the swaying decks of ferries he was used to. This was how champions traveled. It still felt deeply strange. In the small, luxuriously appointed cabin, Diantha was across the aisle, speaking in rapid, hushed French into a satellite phone, her brow furrowed with concentration. She was managing the political fallout from Lumios, spinning a narrative of Ash being a guest consultant for a new league task force on unusual Pokémon behavior. It was a flimsy shield, but it was buying them time. Cynthia sat opposite Ash, her nose in a leather-bound book so old the title on its spine had been worn away to illegibility. She hadn't said a word for the past hour, but Ash could feel her quiet, analytical presence, a steady anchor in the turbulent sea of his own thoughts. He closed his eyes, ignoring the breathtaking view, and reached inward. The golden hum of the monarch's aura was always there now, a constant companion. It was less of a wild torrent and more of a deep, powerful river flowing through him. Cynthia's advice had been sound. Coaxing it, guiding it, was the key. He had spent the long flight practicing, not trying to perform grand feats, but simply letting the aura flow into small, mundane things. He'd channeled a thread of it into a wilting flower in a vase on the table, watching with quiet awe as its petals had slowly regained their color and strength. He'd let it brush against Pikachu's sleeping form, feeling his partner's dreams of chasing Butterfree and battling formidable foes. He was beginning to understand. The aura wasn't just a source of power, it was a sense. A new way of perceiving the world. It was like seeing in color after a lifetime of black and white. He could feel the life force of the clouds they passed through, the distant, sleeping consciousness of the ocean far below, the collective thrum of the billions of lives on the continent they were leaving behind. And he could feel the cold spot ahead of them, a growing stain on the vibrant canvas of the world. Unova. It wasn't a vague feeling like the one he'd had approaching Lumios. This was a sharp, focused point of pain. It felt like a shard of black ice driven deep into the world's heart, emanating a cold that was actively pushing back against the planet's natural warmth. It's concentrated, he said, his voice quiet, drawing Cynthia's attention from her book. The null. It's not just causing ripples there. It feels like it's gathering. Cynthia closed the ancient tome, her gray eyes sharp. Our intelligence confirms it. The area for 50 miles around the Dragon Spiral Tower has been experiencing localized weather phenomena that defy all meteorological models. Sudden, unnatural temperature drops, winds that change direction without cause, and a complete absence of wild Pokémon activity. They're not attacking. They've simply fled. The entire ecosystem is holding its breath. Diantha finished her call, her expression grim. I just spoke with my league contact in Oplucid City. It's worse than the reports. Iris has declared the entire White Forest and the surrounding area a no-fly zone. She's turned back league officials, researchers, even Officer Jenny's, at the border of the quarantine. Her Dragonite is enforcing the perimeter. She's told everyone to stay away, that this is a matter for dragons, and that human interference will only make it worse. She's trying to handle it alone, Ash stated. It was exactly what he would have done, once upon a time. Face a world-ending threat with nothing but his own grit and his Pokémon. He understood the impulse. He also knew how dangerously arrogant it was. Iris is unique among the champions, Cynthia said carefully. She was raised in the wild, among dragons. Her connection to her Pokémon is primal, her instincts razor-sharp. She trusts that instinct above all else, above technology, above politics, and certainly above the pronouncements of a newly crowned monarch she's never met. She will see us as a threat, Diantha concluded. Another complication in a situation she believes she, and only she, can control. She's not wrong to be wary, Ash admitted, looking down at his hands. This power, it is unnatural. But so is the null. You can't fight a poison by letting it run its course. He met their gazes, his own resolve hardening. She's proud, and she's strong. I get it. But her pride is going to get her and her Pokémon killed if we don't intervene. We have to make her listen. And how do we do that? Diantha asked. Reason has failed. Authority has been rejected. What leverage do we have? Ash looked out the window again, toward the distant horizon where Unova lay. He felt the cold spot, the shard of ice, and within it, he could feel another energy. A furious, defiant, draconic power, raging against the encroaching cold like a bonfire in a blizzard. It was Iris. We don't use leverage, Ash said, a new clarity in his voice. We don't use politics or history. We speak her language. Pikachu, sensing the shift in his partner's demeanor, woke up. He crawled onto Ash's shoulder, his cheek sparking, his dark eyes fixed on the horizon as if he, too, could see the battle that awaited them. The jet touched down at a small, private airfield outside of Nimbasa City. The moment the door opened, the change in atmosphere was stark. The air wasn't just humid, it was heavy, charged with a tense, static energy that made the hairs on Ash's arms stand up. The sky, a hazy white, seemed to press down on the land. They didn't linger. A rugged, black SUV, arranged by Diantha's seemingly limitless network, was waiting for them. They drove east, away from the glittering artifice of Nimbasa and into the wild heart of Unova. The further they went, the more oppressive the feeling became. The vibrant greens of the landscape seemed leached of color, and the usual cacophony of wild Pokémon sounds was replaced by an unnerving silence. They reached the edge of the quarantine zone an hour later. It wasn't a formal barrier, just a point on the road where the forest grew thick and dark. And standing in the middle of that road, blocking their path, was a figure. Even from a distance, Iris was an unmistakable force of nature. Her wild, impossibly voluminous hair was a thundercloud of purple, her dark skin a stark contrast to the simple, functional clothes she wore. Her arms were crossed, her stance wide and defiant. Beside her, a towering Haxorus stood like a statue carved from obsidian and steel, its axe-like tusks gleaming even in the dim light. Its yellow eyes were fixed on their approaching vehicle, unblinking and predatory. The SUV rolled to a stop. So much for a diplomatic approach, Diantha murmured from the back seat. Ash didn't wait for a plan. He opened his door and stepped out, Pikachu on his shoulder. Cynthia followed, her Garchomp materializing at her side with a silent ripple of power, its presence an immediate and potent counterbalance to the Haxorus. That's far enough. Iris's voice rang out, sharp and clear as a blade. It wasn't a shout, it was a command. This area is closed. Turn around. Iris, Cynthia began, her voice calm and even. We're not here as League officials. We're here to help. I don't need your help, Iris shot back, her gaze sweeping over them, dismissing Diantha and the car before settling on Ash with burning intensity. Especially not his. Her eyes narrowed. I felt your energy the moment you entered Unovan airspace, Monarch. It feels just as wrong as the cold. You reek of unnatural power. Whatever is happening here, you're a part of the problem, not the solution. Haxorus took a step forward, letting out a low growl that vibrated in Ash's chest. It was a clear warning. The power isn't the problem, Ash said, taking a step forward himself, ignoring Cynthia's subtle motion to hold back. It's how you use it. Something is attacking this place, and you're trying to fight it by yourself. This is a trial. Iris declared, her voice rising with passion. A test for the land and for the dragons who protect it. The world has a fever, and it will burn it out on its own. It has before. The stories are all there, great calamities, world-altering battles, and the world endures. It heals. Your kind of power, this, managed power, she gestured dismissively at him, it's like a medicine that weakens the body's ability to fight for itself. You want to play God, coddling the world until it can't survive without you. And I say you're a doctor who's watching a patient die, telling them to just be stronger. Ash retorted, his own frustration flaring. I can feel what's happening at that tower. It isn't a fever, it's a poison. It's draining the life from this place. Your Pokémon are fighting it, and they're losing. Your pride is going to be their tombstone. The accusation hit home. A flash of anger, hot and fierce, crossed Iris's face. You know nothing about my Pokémon. Or my pride. I know what it looks like. Ash shot back. I've been there. I've stood alone against something I thought I could beat and almost lost everything because of it. The difference is, I learned from it. Enough. Iris roared, the sound echoing through the silent forest. Her Haxorus mirrored her fury, slamming its foot down, cracking the asphalt of the road. You are a child playing with forces you can't comprehend. This is a matter of instinct, of primal power, not some textbook problem you can solve with a clever trick like you did in Kalos. Leave. Now. Or my dragons will make you leave. From above, a shadow fell over them. Iris's Dragonite descended from the sky, landing with a ground-shaking thud on the other side of their vehicle, effectively boxing them in. It was a magnificent creature, larger than most, its eyes burning with fierce loyalty. The standoff was absolute. The air was thick with the combined pressure of two champion-level dragons, a Garchomp that could level mountains, and Ash's own burgeoning aura. Then, it happened. A wave of cold, so profound and absolute it felt like the death of heat itself, washed over them. It didn't come from the tower in the distance. It came from the sky directly above. They all looked up. The hazy white sky was tearing open. It wasn't a crack, it was like the world was a digital screen that was glitching, pixels of reality dissolving into a hole of pure, silent blackness. From this tear in the world, a shape began to emerge. It had the silhouette of Kyurem, the legendary ice dragon of Unova, the husk left behind from the original dragon. But it was horribly, fundamentally wrong. Its body wasn't solid ice and flesh, but a constantly shifting, glitching amalgamation of shadowy energy and razor-sharp ice crystals. Its movements were jerky, unnatural. One of its wings was malformed, a construct of black ice that seemed to absorb the light around it. The familiar yellow crest on its head was dark, and its eyes were voids. Empty holes in its face that radiated pure, unadulterated entropy. This was not Kyurem. It was a puppet, a hollowed-out effigy animated by the null. A soundless scream echoed in their minds, a psychic shockwave of pure despair and nothingness that made Ash clutch his head in agony. Pikachu shrieked, letting off a panicked blast of electricity that fizzled out a few feet from his body. Iris stared, her defiance momentarily replaced by sheer, horrified disbelief. "No, what have they done to you?" she whispered, recognizing the legendary Pokémon she revered, twisted into this monstrous parody. The null Kyurem didn't roar. It didn't need to. It opened its maw, and a beam of crackling black energy shot out, not at the trainers, but at the forest. The beam hit a cluster of ancient oak trees. They didn't freeze or burn. They just ceased to be. One moment they were there, the next, there was just empty space and a patch of ground covered in a fine gray dust that was rapidly dissolving into nothing. The beam had not destroyed them, it had erased them from existence. That single act of utter annihilation shattered the standoff. Haxorus, Dragon Claw. Dragonite, Dragon Rush. Iris screamed, her shock instantly transmuting into pure, unadulterated rage. Her two dragons didn't hesitate. They were engines of destruction, launching themselves at the corrupted legend. Haxorus closed the distance on the ground, its claws glowing with searing green energy. Dragonite became a comet of blue draconic force, rocketing through the air. They struck the Nulcurum simultaneously. The impact was immense, shaking the very air. But something was wrong. Their powerful attacks, which could shatter mountains, seemed to just dissipate. The dragon energy was absorbed into the Nulcurum's glitching form, causing it to flicker violently but leaving it fundamentally unharmed. The corrupted beast retaliated. It swung its malformed wing, a blade of pure entropy, in a wide arc. Dragonite, caught off guard by the lack of effect from its attack, couldn't dodge in time. The wing clipped it, and the mighty dragon cried out in pain, not from the physical impact, but from the touch. Where the wing had made contact, its scales had turned a dull, lifeless gray, the vibrant orange color drained away. A wave of debilitating weakness washed over it, and it struggled to stay airborne. It's feeding on their energy. Cynthia yelled, her strategic mind cutting through the shock. Conventional attacks are making it stronger. The Nulcurum fixed its empty gaze on Haxorus. Ice, black and shot through with veins of violet energy, formed around its maw. It was preparing an attack, and Ash could feel the sheer, world-ending power gathering within it. Iris saw it too, her face pale with terror for her partner. "Haxorus, get back," she shrieked. But Haxorus, loyal to a fault, stood its ground, preparing to meet the attack head-on. There was no time for a plan. No time for an order. There was only instinct. "Pikachu, on me!" Ash yelled. He broke into a dead sprint, not away from the danger, but directly towards it, angling himself between the Nulcurum and Iris's Haxorus. The golden aura within him erupted, not as a gentle stream, but as a roaring bonfire, a desperate shield against the encroaching void. Iris, left flank. It's reforming its wing. Dragonite, use the opening. Now. Ash's voice cut through the chaos, not as a commander, but as a fellow warrior in the thick of the fight. His shout, filled with the undeniable authority of the monarch's aura, broke through Iris's panic. Her instincts took over. She saw the opening Ash had spotted, a flicker of instability in the Nulcurum's form as it focused its main attack. Dragonite, Hyper Beam. Don't aim for the body, aim for the space beside its head. Disrupt the air, she commanded, her battlefield instincts syncing with Ash's. Meanwhile, Ash was still running. Pikachu, Electroweb. Not an attack. A platform. Pikachu leaped from his shoulder, spinning and firing a wide, flat net of sticky electricity into the air a few feet in front of Ash. Ash hit it at full speed, his sneakers finding purchase on the impossible surface for a fraction of a second. He used the momentum to launch himself upward, a gravity-defying leap that put him directly in the path of the forming attack. Dragonite's hyper beam screamed past the Nulcurum's head. The sheer energy discharge disturbed the air, causing the entity to flicker, its aim thrown off for a critical split second. The blast of entropic ice erupted from its mouth. It was a wave of absolute zero, a physical manifestation of nothingness. And Ash was right in its path. He couldn't dodge. He couldn't block. So he did the only thing he could. He flared his aura. He held his hands out, crossing his arms in front of his chest as the beam hit him. The world dissolved into a silent, screaming agony of pure cold. It was not the cold of ice. It was the cold of non-existence. It felt like his very soul was being unwritten, his atoms pulled apart. The golden aura roared to life, a desperate, defiant sun fighting against an encroaching black hole. It wasn't a shield that repelled the attack, it was a sponge, absorbing the raw, entropic energy into himself. A guttural scream was torn from his throat, a sound of pure, unadulterated pain. The monarch's power was the only thing keeping him from being erased from reality entirely. He felt the void energy clawing at his life force, trying to extinguish the golden flame. Iris watched, horrified. The arrogant boy she had been ready to fight was now sacrificing himself to save her Pokémon. He was taking a blow that would have annihilated Haxorus. In that moment, her pride, her ideology, her certainty, it all shattered. He wasn't trying to play God. He was playing the hero, in the most reckless, insane, and noble way she had ever seen. The beam subsided. Ash tumbled from the air, smoke, or something like it, a dark mist of spent energy, rising from his body. He crashed to the ground, his jacket torn, his body racked with tremors. But he was alive. And Haxorus was safe. He pushed himself onto one knee, his breathing ragged, his vision swimming. The pain was indescribable, a deep, soul-level cold that felt like it would never leave. Still, standing, he gasped, his voice raw. He looked at Iris, his eyes blazing with golden light and sheer, indomitable will. Together. Or we all get erased. Something broke in Iris. It was her pride, giving way to a burning, furious respect. This boy, this monarch, he fought like a dragon. He fought with a reckless, passionate spirit that mirrored her own. Together, she roared back, her voice a clarion call. Her eyes met Ash's, and in that instant, a bond was forged, a warrior's pact sealed in the heat of a desperate battle. She leaped onto her Haxorus's back. Get ready. Cynthia, now. Ash yelled, not needing to look. Cynthia was already moving. Garchomp, stone edge. Create a perimeter. Box it in. Pillars of sharpened rock erupted from the ground, forming a crude ring around the Nulcurum, penning it in for precious seconds. Ash, its energy is unstable from your absorption. Cynthia relayed, her analytical mind finding the weakness. A combined energy attack might overload its matrix. You heard her. Ash yelled to Iris, staggering to his feet. Pikachu was on his shoulder, a tiny bastion of furious loyalty, his own energy bristling. Give us everything you've got. Aim for my thunderbolt. Haxorus, outrage. Dragonite, Draco Meteor. Don't hold back. Funnel it all. Iris commanded, her voice ringing with newfound power. Haxorus's body became wreathed in a pulsating red aura of pure draconic fury. Dragonite soared into the sky, its body glowing, summoning a barrage of cosmic dragon energy from the heavens. Pikachu. Let's show them our real power. Ash roared, pouring every last ounce of his remaining, pain-racked energy into the bond with his partner. The golden aura, now tainted with threads of the black void energy he had absorbed, surged into Pikachu. Pikachu became a sun. 10 million volt thunderbolt. A colossal beam of multicolored, aura-infused lightning erupted from Pikachu. At the same instant, Haxorus unleashed its outrage not as a physical attack, but as a focused beam of pure red dragon energy. From above, the Draco meteor shower converged, the meteors melting into a single, titanic river of celestial power. The three attacks met in midair. They did not collide. They merged. The lightning acted as a core, and the two streams of draconic power wrapped around it, creating a spiraling, tricolored vortex of life, lightning, and primal fury. The combined beam struck the Nulcurum dead center. For a moment, the corrupted legend absorbed it, its glitching form swelling, trying to consume this new feast of power. But it was too much. The life force of the monarch's aura was anathema to it. The raw, untamed power of two dragons pushed it over the edge. The null's hold was not a physical thing that could be broken, it had to be overwhelmed, overloaded. The Nulcurum's silent, psychic scream reached a fever pitch. Cracks of golden and red light spread across its shadowy form. It flickered violently, like a dying television screen, and then, with a final, silent implosion, it dissolved. It didn't explode. It simply ceased to be, leaving behind nothing but a profound, lingering cold and the ozone tang of Pikachu's attack. Silence descended on the broken road. Dragonite landed, exhausted. Haxorus's red aura faded, leaving it breathing heavily. Ash's legs finally gave out. The adrenaline, the aura, the sheer willpower that had been holding him up, all vanished. The world tilted, darkness rushing in at the edges of his vision. The last thing he saw before he blacked out was Iris leaping from Haxorus's back, her face a mask of alarm, rushing to catch him before he hit the ground. He woke slowly, surfacing from a deep, cold darkness. The first thing he registered was warmth. A gentle, steady heat that was slowly pushing back the soul-deep chill. He cracked his eyes open. He was lying on a bed of furs in what looked like a large, rustic cabin. A crackling fire in a stone hearth was the source of the warmth. Pikachu was curled up on his chest, a tiny, electric furnace. He's waking up. He turned his head. Iris was sitting on a nearby stool, watching him. Her expression was no longer defiant or angry. It was quiet, thoughtful, and held a deep, bottomless respect. Her Haxorus and Dragonite were resting near the fire, their wounds bandaged. Cynthia and Diantha stood near the doorway, their faces etched with concern. "How long?" Ash rasped, his throat dry. "A few hours," Iris said, her voice soft. She held out a wooden cup filled with water, and he drank gratefully. "You took the full force of that thing. The cold of the void. My grandmother, the village elder, used to say it's a cold that leeches the spirit. I thought," she trailed off, unable to finish the thought. "My aura is keeping him stable," Cynthia supplied. She had her hand resting gently on Ash's forehead. He could feel a subtle, calming energy flowing from her, helping his own battered aura to mend itself. But it was his own power that saved him. It fought off the worst of the entropic corruption. "You are remarkably resilient, Ash." Ash pushed himself into a sitting position, wincing. Every muscle ached, and the phantom sensation of the void still lingered, but he was alive. "Is it over?" "Here, for now," Iris confirmed. "The cold from the tower is receding. The life is returning to the forest. You didn't just defeat that monster. You healed the land." She looked at him, her eyes clear and direct. "I was wrong. I was proud, and I was a fool. I felt the poison, but I believed my dragons and I were strong enough. I was ready to let us all die for my belief in the natural way. Your way, it isn't about control. It's about protection. You don't fight like a god. You fight for the world." She stood up and walked over to him. She didn't bow. She didn't offer a formal pledge. She simply looked him in the eye, warrior to warrior. "I am the champion of Unova. My instincts and my dragons are sworn to protect this land. That thing we fought is a threat to everything I hold dear. You are the only one who seems to know how to fight it. My instincts are screaming at me now, and they're telling me that the only way to win this fight is to stand with you." She held out her hand. "My power is yours to command, monarch." Ash looked at her hand, then back to her face. He didn't take it. Instead, he smiled, a tired but genuine grin. "Don't call me that. It's just Ash. And I don't want to command you, Iris. I want to fight alongside you." A slow, fierce smile spread across Iris's face. She clasped his shoulder instead, a gesture of comradeship that was worth more than any oath. "Ash, then. You fight like a dragon, Ash Ketchum." It was the highest praise she could give. Just then, Diantha's datapad chimed. She had been standing with Cynthia, analyzing a device that was scanning the residual energy in the air. Her face went pale. "Cynthia, look at this," she said, her voice tight. Cynthia moved to her side, her eyes narrowing as she looked at the screen. "What is it?" When the Nulcurum dissipated, it left behind trace elements. Almost all of it was pure, unidentifiable entropic energy. But not all of it, Diantha explained, pointing to a complex waveform on the display. There's a ghost in the machine. A faint, repeating signal buried within the null's energy signature. It's heavily encrypted, but its origin is unmistakable. She zoomed in on the signal's carrier wave frequency. It's a Pokémon League-sanctioned deep space communication frequency. The kind they use to monitor satellites near the distortion world. The implication hung in the air, colder than any attack from the Null-Curum. The mole on the committee, Ash breathed, understanding dawning. They're not just helping the null. They're communicating with it. Or, studying it. Or trying to control it, Cynthia finished, her voice grim. The cosmic, impersonal threat of the null had just gained a terrifyingly human face. They were not just fighting a force of nature. They were fighting someone who sought to harness it. Someone with the power of the Pokémon League at their fingertips, who was willing to let the world burn to achieve their goals. Their alliance had grown stronger, but the enemy had just become infinitely more complex and dangerous. Chapter 4, The Paldine Protocol. The flight to Paldea was a study in contrasts. The atmosphere inside Diantha's jet was thick with a new kind of tension, no longer just the dread of a cosmic unknown, but the sharp, acrid paranoia of human betrayal. The discovery of a League-sanctioned signal within the null's energy signature had changed the nature of the war. They were no longer just fighting a storm, they were fighting the person who was seeding the clouds. Outside, the world was a breathtaking tapestry of turquoise sea and sun-drenched coastlines. As they crossed the strait from Kalos, the sprawling, vibrant expanse of the Paldea region unfolded beneath them. It was a land of rugged mountains, rolling fields, and ancient history, all centered around the massive great crater of Paldea, a mysterious wound in the heart of the continent. Ash sat by the window, not admiring the view. He was focused inward, sifting through the lingering remnants of the battle in Unova. The fight with the Null-Curum had changed him. The act of absorbing the entropic energy had left a permanent mark, not a scar, but an alteration. The golden river of the monarch's aura now had a thin, dark current running through it, a thread of the null's void energy that he had assimilated rather than expelled. It felt cold, but not malevolent. It was silent, empty, and obedient. It was a part of him now, like a shadow stitched to his soul. He could feel its potential. Where the golden aura was life, creation, and connection, this new power was silence, stillness, and severance. He hadn't told the others yet. He wasn't sure how. Hey, that thing that tried to erase me from existence. I think I accidentally kept a piece of it, and now it's mine. It didn't seem like a conversation starter. His vitals are stable, but his aura is different. Cynthia's voice was low, coming from the front of the cabin where she and Diantha were reviewing data from a handheld scanner. It's like a song that has gained a new, minor key. It's not discordant, but the harmony has irrevocably shifted. Is he in any danger? Diantha asked, her concern palpable. I don't think so, Cynthia replied, though her tone lacked complete certainty. It seems he didn't just repel the null's energy, he metabolized it. Forged it into a tool. It is an unprecedented biological and spiritual event. Iris, who had insisted on accompanying them, sat cross-legged on a divan, her Axu asleep in her lap. She had been mostly silent throughout the flight, watching Ash with an intense, unblinking gaze. She wasn't studying him like a scientist, she was observing him like a fellow predator, trying to understand the new shape of his power. He smells different, she said, her voice cutting through the quiet hum of the engines. Like a storm cloud and the clear sky after. Both at once. Before the conversation could go further, the jet's comm system chimed. Ladies, Monarch, the pilot's voice came through, we're on final approach to Mesagoza. And we have company. An official envoy from the Kanto League, it seems. They've been granted priority clearance and are waiting for us on the tarmac. Diantha frowned. An envoy? I wasn't informed. She looked at Cynthia, whose expression had become guarded. Kanto, Cynthia mused. That means Lance or Lorelei. Let's hope for Lance, Iris grumbled. He knows how to fight. The other one just thinks. As the jet taxied to a halt in a private hangar at the Messagoza airport, Ash saw who was waiting. It was Lorelei. The Kanto Elite Four member stood beside a sleek black car, a vision of cool, intellectual severity. Her red hair was impeccably styled, her glasses perched perfectly on her nose. She wore a sharp, professional suit, and her posture was rigid, radiating an aura of frosty disapproval. Beside her, her Lapras shimmered into existence from its poke ball, its intelligent eyes surveying their jet with a calm, analytical gaze. The ramp lowered, and Ash, Cynthia, Diantha, and Iris stepped out into the warm Paldine air. Cynthia. Diantha. Iris, Lorelei greeted them, her voice as crisp and cool as her demeanor. She offered no pleasantries, no welcome. Her sharp eyes scanned their group before landing on Ash, her gaze lingering for a fraction of a second too long. And the monarch. The League Committee sends its greetings. And its concerns. Lorelei, Cynthia said, her tone polite but equally cool. This is a surprise. To what do we owe the pleasure? The pleasure, as you put it, is a matter of inquiry, Lorelei stated, pushing her glasses up her nose. Winden. Lumiose. Now the Dragon Spiral incident. A pattern of high-level anomalous events, all centered around Mr. Ketchum here. The committee has formed a special subcommittee to investigate these phenomena, and I have been appointed as its lead observer. My directive is to accompany you, observe your methods, and report my findings. Her words were carefully chosen, but the meaning was clear. She wasn't here as an ally. She was a watchdog. A spy. A subcommittee that includes the head of the tournament sanctioning board, by any chance? Diantha asked, her voice laced with ice. A flicker of something, surprise. Annoyance, crossed Lorelei's face before her mask of composure snapped back into place. The members of the subcommittee are classified. My purpose here is simply to gather data. Then you can gather it from a distance, Iris snapped, stepping forward, her hand drifting towards the poke ball at her belt. We're not on some research field trip. Enough, Ash said, his voice quiet but firm. All three champions fell silent, turning to him. He walked forward, stopping a few feet from Lorelei, meeting her cold, analytical gaze without flinching. He could feel her skepticism, a wall of logic and doubt. She was looking at him not as a person, but as a variable in an equation she was trying to solve. You're here to observe, Ash said. Fine. Observe. You can ride with us. You can watch what we do. But you will not interfere, and you will share any data you collect. We're not the enemy here, Lorelei. But we are running out of time to convince people of that. Lorelei seemed taken aback by his directness. She had clearly expected a defiant teenager, not a young man who radiated an aura of quiet, unshakable command. She looked from his determined face to the three powerful champions standing behind him, a united front of fierce loyalty. Her position as an observer was suddenly looking far more complicated. A reasonable protocol, she conceded after a moment, a hint of grudging respect in her tone. My vehicle is ready. I'm told our destination is the Naranja Academy. Champion Gita is expecting us. She turned and got into her car without another word. The message was clear, she would cooperate, but she was not on their side. I don't like her, Iris muttered as they climbed into their own vehicle. She smells like a library. She's not the problem, Cynthia said, her gaze distant. She's a symptom. The faction on the league committee that our mole belongs to is making its move. They can't suppress us, so they're trying to control us by embedding one of their own. This just got much more complicated. Ash stared out the window as they drove towards the magnificent tiered city of Messagoza. He felt the cold spot again, but it was different here. In Unova, it had been a raw, focused wound. Here, it was a spiderweb. Thin, almost invisible threads of the null's influence were woven through the city's infrastructure. It wasn't a frontal assault, it was an infiltration. A sabotage. And as they ascended the winding roads to the Naranja Academy, a new, chilling thought occurred to him. Lorelei wasn't the only one who had just been embedded. What if the null had already placed its own observer inside the very place they were going for help? The Naranja Academy was a breathtaking hub of learning, a sprawling complex of terracotta roofs, sun-drenched courtyards, and bustling student life. But beneath the vibrant surface, something was wrong. The automated doors to the entrance hall stuttered, opening and closing erratically. The digital information boards flickered, displaying garbled text. The school's famously efficient systems were failing in small, inexplicable ways. They were met in the grand entrance hall by La Primera herself, top champion Gita. She was a commanding presence, tall and elegant, her distinctive, multicolored hair a striking contrast to her severe, business-like attire. Her expression was a mask of strained professionalism, but Ash could sense the immense pressure radiating from her. Behind her, a half-dozen of her league staff members scurried about, speaking into headsets, their faces pale with stress. Champions, Mr. Ketchum, Gita greeted them, her voice tight and clipped. Lorelei. Thank you for coming on such short notice. As you can see, we have a situation. She gestured at a nearby flickering light fixture. It began 3 days ago. Minor system glitches. We assumed it was a software bug. Then, the Academy's central server farm went offline for 2 hours for no reason. The navigation systems for the school's flying taxis began failing mid-flight. The repository for all of Paldea's Terra Orb energy experienced a critical power fluctuation that nearly caused a catastrophic discharge. These are not random malfunctions, she continued, leading them through the chaotic halls. They are precise, targeted strikes at our most critical infrastructure. There is no evidence of a hack, no sign of physical sabotage. It's as if the systems are simply choosing to fail. My technical staff is on the verge of a collective nervous breakdown, and the Board of Governors is demanding answers I do not have. It's the null, Diantha said grimly. It's evolving. It's moved past brute force attacks on Pokémon and into strategic sabotage. It's creating agents, Ash corrected, his voice low. The idea had been forming since they'd landed. It's not the systems that are failing. It's the people maintaining them. He closed his eyes for a moment, focusing, trying to use the dark thread of null energy within him as a divining rod. He'd felt it in the stadium, the vacant-eyed Corviknight. He'd felt it in Bisharp, a mind trapped in a cold fog. He now understood that the null didn't just control Pokémon, it could subtly influence people. It couldn't take them over completely, not like it did with Pokémon, but it could touch their minds. It could whisper. It could plant a seed of distraction, a moment of forgetfulness, a subtle error in judgment. A technician entering a single wrong line of code. A security guard forgetting to run a diagnostic. A pilot misreading a dial. Small, human errors, amplified by the null's influence, causing a cascading failure across the entire system. Human agents? Gita asked, her skepticism clear. You're suggesting a person is behind this? Not consciously, Ash explained, opening his eyes. A new, chilling clarity was settling over him. He could feel it now, faint, cold spots, not on the machines, but on the people. Tiny, almost imperceptible traces of the null's influence clinging to a handful of the faculty and staff moving through the halls. These people weren't traitors. They were victims. Unwitting instruments of chaos. The null is nudging them. Making them make mistakes. It's too subtle for anyone to notice. Lorelei scoffed, adjusting her glasses. You're basing this on a feeling. We need empirical evidence, not mystical intuition. The most logical explanation remains a highly sophisticated cyber attack. Then why can't your experts find it? Ash countered, turning to her. Why is there no trace? It's because the corruption isn't in the machine code, it's in the wetware. The people. Gita looked from Ash's unwavering certainty to Lorelei's dismissive skepticism. As La Primera, the top champion, her entire career was built on results and tangible proof. But her own experts had found nothing. She was desperate. Let's assume your fantastic theory is correct, Mr. Ketchum. How do we prove it? And more importantly, how do we stop it? This was the test. Gita didn't care about myths or prophecies. She cared about competence. Ash had to show her not that he was powerful, but that he was effective. One of these nudges will be bigger than the others, Ash reasoned, his mind racing. It's been escalating. The next target will be the most critical system in the academy. The one that, if it fails, will cause the most chaos. The Terrestrial Phenomenon Research Lab, Gita said immediately, her face paling. Professor Time is about to conduct a crucial experiment to stabilize the raw energy siphon from the Great Crater. If that fails, it could cause a chain reaction that would destabilize the entire crater, Cynthia finished, the horrifying implications clear. It would be a regional cataclysm. Then that's where we'll find our proof, Ash said, his expression grim. We need to get to that lab. Now. The Terrestrial Research Lab was deep in the Academy's sublevels, a clean room of white walls and gleaming chrome. In the center of the room, a massive containment field held a swirling, crystalline orb of pure, untamed energy, raw terrestrial power. Wires and conduits snaked from it to a central control console, where a woman with distinctive, ghost-like white hair was overseeing a team of researchers. Professor Time. She looked stressed, her attention divided between her team and the fluctuating readings on her monitor. Gita led them into the glass-walled observation room overlooking the lab. The experiment is set to begin in 10 minutes, she said, her voice strained. They're going to attempt to channel that raw energy into a prototype Master Terra orb. If they succeed, it could revolutionize Terra training. If they fail, Ash ignored the technical explanation. He closed his eyes, focusing. He let the monarch's aura recede, and instead, he reached for the cold, silent thread of the null within him. It felt unnatural, like flexing a muscle he didn't know he had. He used it not to project power, but to listen. To sense. The lab was a hum of activity and anxiety. But beneath it, he felt it. A single, distinct cold spot. It was stronger than the faint traces he'd felt on the staff in the halls. This was a deliberate, focused point of influence. He opened his eyes and scanned the room. His gaze passed over Professor Time, the junior researchers, the security guards. And then he saw him. A quiet, unassuming man in the corner of the lab, a senior research assistant named Dr. Abel. He was double-checking a power conduit, his expression one of calm focus. He looked like the most reliable person in the room. But Ash could feel the coldness clinging to him like a shroud. The null wasn't just nudging him. It was holding him. Dr. Abel wasn't a saboteur. He was a puppet. It's him, Ash said quietly, pointing. The man in the corner. He's the one. Dr. Abel. Gita said, shocked. That's impossible. He's my most trusted researcher. He's been with the Academy for 20 years. He is compromised, Lorelei stated, but she was looking at her own datapad, which was running a biometric scan of the room via a discreetly placed sensor. His vital signs are anomalous. Heart rate is unnaturally steady. Pupil dilation is non-responsive. Brainwave activity shows a suppressed emotional state. It's consistent with a hypnotic trance, or something else. Her analytical mind, faced with data, was being forced to concede. Ash was right. He's going to sabotage the primary energy conduit, Ash said, watching the man's movements. When Professor Time initiates the sequence, he's going to reverse the polarity for a fraction of a second. It will cause a feedback loop that will shatter the containment field. We have to stop him, Diantha urged. If we storm the lab, he might trigger it early, Cynthia warned. We'll cause a panic and lose any chance of understanding how this influence works. This was the crux of the problem. A test of leadership. Geeta looked at Ash, her expression demanding. What is your protocol, Monarch? Ash's mind raced. He couldn't fight this with force. He couldn't expose Dr. Abel publicly without destroying the man's life and revealing the Null's existence to the world. He had to perform surgery, not an amputation. Geeta, I need you to trust me. Create a diversion. Something that will draw everyone's attention, including Professor Time's, for about 10 seconds. Geeta stared at him for a long moment, weighing her entire career against the word of this strange boy. Then she nodded curtly and spoke into her wrist. Security. We have a minor containment breach in sublevel 4. A non-hazardous gas leak. Trigger a localized, visual-only alarm in the Terrestrial lab. Now. Iris, Ash said, turning to the Unovan champion. Be ready to move. You're Aksu. Use its senses. Tell me if anyone else in that room feels cold to you. Iris nodded, her eyes narrowed in concentration, a new respect for his methods dawning on her. Inside the lab, red lights began to flash silently on the ceiling. Professor Time and her team looked up, startled. What's that? Report, she demanded. For a few precious seconds, every eye in the lab was turned away from the console and the conduits. Now, Ash said. He didn't move. He closed his eyes. He reached for the cold, dark thread inside him. The piece of the Null. And for the first time, he didn't just sense with it. He used it. He projected a sliver of that cold, silent energy across the room, directly into Dr. Abel's mind. It wasn't an attack. It was a message in a language the Null would understand. He didn't send a thought or a word. He sent a command of pure, absolute stillness. Avoid meeting a void. In the lab, Dr. Abel, whose hand had been moving towards a control panel on the conduit, froze. His body went rigid, his eyes glazing over for a second. The Null's influence, met with a stronger, more controlled version of its own energy, faltered. It was like two opposing magnetic fields repelling each other. He stalled, Lorelei breathed, watching her monitor. The external influence is being counteracted by another anomalous signal. From in here. She looked at Ash with a new, deeply unsettled expression. The 10 seconds were up. The diversion was over. Professor Time, assured it was a false alarm, turned back to her work. Final check. Initiating energy transfer in 3, 2, 1, she pressed the button. The raw energy in the containment field surged through the main conduit. Dr. Abel, his face a mask of confusion as if waking from a dream, stumbled back from the console he had been about to sabotage. The experiment proceeded flawlessly. The swirling orb of power flowed into the prototype Master Terra orb, which glowed with a brilliant, stable light. The lab erupted in cheers. Professor Time sagged against her console with relief. In the observation room, the tension broke. Geeta stared at the stable readings, then at Ash, her mouth slightly agape. He had not only predicted the sabotage, but he had prevented it. Silently. Remotely. Without a single Pokemon battle. It was a display of quiet, terrifying competence that was more impressive than any G-Max wildfire. How, was all she could say. I fought fire with fire, Ash said, a wave of exhaustion hitting him as he severed the delicate connection. Using the Null energy felt dirty. Draining. Now we have to act, before the Null realizes its pawn is compromised. He looked at Geeta. I need a private room. And I need you to bring Dr. Abel to me. Alone. Tell him you need to debrief him on the false alarm. No security. No one else. Gita didn't question him. She simply nodded and left to make the arrangements, her stride now filled with a purpose that had been absent before. Lorelei watched Ash, her analytical mind struggling to process what she had just witnessed. He hadn't just used some vague aura power. He had manipulated the enemy's own energy against it. He wasn't just a variable. He was an entirely new kind of equation. They met in a small, soundproofed office. Dr. Abel, a kindly-looking man in his 50s, entered looking confused but obliging. Top champion. You wish to see me? The moment the door closed, Ash stepped forward. Cynthia, Diantha, and Iris stood behind him, a silent wall of authority. Dr. Abel, Ash said, his voice gentle. You're not in any trouble. But you have been sick. We need to talk about the last few days. About the small mistakes. The moments of lost time. Dr. Abel looked confused. I don't know what you mean. I've been perfectly fine. Let me help you remember, Ash said. He reached out, not with the cold null energy, but with the warm, golden light of the monarch's aura. He gently placed his fingertips on the man's temple. He didn't force his way in. He offered a connection. He showed the doctor what he had become, a passenger in his own body. He showed him the cold fog that had clouded his judgment, the subtle whispers that had guided his hands to make catastrophic errors. He showed him the moment he had almost destroyed the lab, not out of malice, but because his will was not his own. Dr. Abel's eyes widened in horror. His body began to tremble as the memories, unshrouded from the null's influence, came flooding back. He saw what he had almost done. He collapsed into a chair, his face in his hands, sobbing. I didn't. I would never, we know, Ash said, his voice full of compassion. He drew back his hand, but kept a gentle stream of aura flowing towards the man, a cleansing light that was pushing out the last vestiges of the null's cold touch. It wasn't your fault. But we need your help. The thing that did this to you, we need to understand it. Did you see anything? Hear anything? The doctor, still trembling, looked up. A dream, he whispered. I kept having the same dream. I was in a room of pure white. No doors, no windows. And there was a voice. Not a sound, but a feeling. A thought. It was cold. It didn't talk about destruction. It talked about correctness. About flaws. About how things that were flawed needed to be tidied. Erased. It showed me the academy, the systems, it showed me the flaws, the inefficiencies. It told me I could help make things perfect. The voice of the null. Logical. Seductive. Terrifying. It hadn't corrupted him with promises of power, but with appeals to his own perfectionism. This is critical intelligence, Cynthia breathed. It's learning. It's adapting its methods of influence to the psychology of its target. Ash let the doctor compose himself, the golden aura soothing his panic. He hadn't just gained an ally in Gita. He had saved a good man, and in doing so, had gained a crucial insight into the enemy's evolving mind. Later, Gita stood with them on a private balcony overlooking the academy. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across Paldea. She had personally seen to it that Dr. Abel was given a medical leave of absence and access to the best counselors, his reputation intact. Your methods are unorthodox, monarch, she said, her arms crossed. But the formal title was no longer a sign of skepticism, it was a sign of respect. But they are undeniably effective. You have saved my academy and likely my entire region from a catastrophe, and you did it with a discretion and precision that I have never seen. She turned to face him fully. My primary responsibility is to the stability and prosperity of the Paldine League. This null is the greatest threat to that stability I have ever encountered. My pragmatism dictates that I align myself with the most effective solution available. Her gaze was as sharp and clear as a diamond. You are that solution. The resources of the Paldine Pokemon League, our researchers, our strategic assets, my champions, are at your disposal. Tell me what you need. Before Ash could respond, Lorelei, who had been listening silently, finally spoke. What I have witnessed today, she began, her voice strained, as if the words were physically difficult for her to say, defies all known scientific and paranormal frameworks. However, the data is irrefutable. You possess an ability to not only diagnose but counteract this null influence on a psychic and energetic level. She pushed her glasses up her nose, a nervous gesture that was utterly out of character for her. My directive was to observe. My secondary, unspoken directive was to assess you as a threat. Based on my observations, you are not the threat. My report to the committee will reflect as much. She looked at him, and for the first time, he saw not a skeptic or a spy, but a scientist who had just discovered the world was infinitely more complex than she had ever imagined. I will continue to accompany you. 4. Data acquisition. It wasn't a pledge of loyalty like the others, but it was a tectonic shift. He had won over the warrior, the diplomat, the instinct. Now he had the strategist and the analyst. The aegis was forming. But as he looked out at the great crater, a place of immense and mysterious power, he knew their celebration would be short-lived. The null was intelligent. It had been thwarted twice now in open confrontations. It would not make the same mistake a third time. Its next move would be different. More subtle. More dangerous. And the mole in the league was still out there, watching, learning, and planning. Chapter 5, The Gauntlet of Galar. The war room was a place of quiet, focused dread. It wasn't a formal chamber, but the main lounge of Diantha's jet, transformed. A holographic map of the world floated in the center of the cabin, a glowing blue sphere dotted with angry red markers. Each marker represented a confirmed null incident, and the number was growing at an alarming rate. What had started as a handful of anomalies was becoming a pandemic of chaos. They were en route to Galar, flying into the teeth of the storm. The signal we isolated in Paldea, the one piggybacking on the null's energy, Cynthia said, her fingers manipulating the holographic display, we've cross-referenced it with known League transponder codes. It's a match. She brought up a personnel file, the face of a stern, silver-haired man appearing on the screen. Chairman Rose's former right-hand man. A man named Sheraz. After Rose's downfall, he was reassigned. He's now the head of the tournament sanctioning board. The same man who was pressuring me to endorse Gerard's draconian laws in Kalos, Diantha said, her voice a low, dangerous murmur. And a ranking member of the subcommittee Lorelei reports to, Gita added, her arms crossed, her expression grim. He's been playing both sides, using the null's chaos to push for more centralized league control while simultaneously studying, or perhaps guiding, the entity itself. He thinks he can control it, Ash said. It wasn't a question. He understood the pattern of arrogance. First Chairman Rose with Eternatus, now Sheraz with the null. Men who saw ultimate power as a tool to be harnessed, never comprehending that they were the ones being used. He's not the null's master. He's its enabler. Lorelei, standing apart from the group, adjusted her glasses. Her skepticism had been replaced by a cold, furious intellectualism. She had been fed lies by her superiors. Her entire mission had been predicated on a false narrative. His objective is logical, from a certain cynical point of view, she stated, her voice tight with barely suppressed anger. Create a crisis that only a unified, authoritarian Pokemon League can solve. Use the null as a boogeyman to consolidate power. The problem is, his boogeyman is real, and it's about to burn the whole house down. It already is, Iris said, pointing at the hologram. The red markers were blinking faster, clustering in one specific region. Galar. Why there? Why so many, so fast? Power, Ash answered, his gaze fixed on the map. He could feel it, even from this distance. Galar was saturated with a unique form of energy. Dynamax and Gigantamax power flowed through the land, concentrated in the power spots that dotted the landscape. To the null, which fed on energy, Galar wasn't just a target, it was a feast. Shiraz isn't just enabling it. He's leading it to the trough. He's using his knowledge of Galar's energy grid to direct the null to the places where it can grow strongest, fastest. As if to punctuate his words, a priority alert flashed on the screen. It was a direct communique from Leon, forwarded through Diantha's secure network. His message was short, frantic, and terrifying. Fisher. In the sky. Above the wild area. Army of shadows. Marching on Hammerlock. We're being overwhelmed. The holographic map zoomed in. A massive, angry red blotch was now pulsing over the center of Galar, originating from the northern wild area. From it, lines of smaller red dots were snaking south, directly towards the distinctive walled city of Hammerlock, home to Galar's central energy plant. This is it, Cynthia said, her face pale. The null isn't just sabotaging or corrupting anymore. This is a direct, military-style invasion. It's learned from its defeats, Ash surmised, his mind racing. A single, powerful entity like the corrupted Kurum can be focused on and defeated. A subtle agent can be found and cleansed. But an army is a different kind of problem. Hammerlock's energy plant is built directly over Galar's primary power spot, Gita analyzed, her strategic mind kicking into high gear. If the null's forces reach it and absorb that power, the entity could become exponentially stronger. Strong enough to manifest on a global scale. The stakes had just escalated from regional crises to a potential extinction-level event. The jet's engines roared, banking sharply as the pilot pushed the craft to its maximum speed. On the comm, the pilot's voice was strained. We're 20 minutes out. Galar air traffic control is non-responsive. The sky ahead, it doesn't look right. Ash went to the cockpit. Through the reinforced windscreen, he saw it. The sky over Galar was bruised, a sickly purple-black color that seemed to pulse with a malevolent light. At its center, high above the rugged plains of the wild area, was a tear in reality. It wasn't a subtle distortion, it was a gaping, jagged wound in the fabric of the sky, a fissure of pure blackness from which a steady stream of darkness poured. From the fissure, an army descended. They were constructs of shadow and corrupted Galar particles, taking the vague shapes of Pokemon, towering, spectral Snorlax, swarms of shadowy Corviknight, hulking, glitching Machamp, but they were all wrong. They moved with a single, unified purpose, a river of darkness flowing across the land, their destination clear. And standing against the tide were specks of light. He could see flashes of energy, the telltale signs of Pokemon battles, all along the northern border of Hammerlock. Leon, Raihan, and the other Galar gym leaders were holding the line. But they were outnumbered 1,000 to 1. Ash's new senses told him more than his eyes could. He could feel the cold, empty wrongness of the Shadow Army, a unified consciousness of pure entropy. But he could also feel the defiant, burning lights of the defenders. And among them, two burned with the intensity of champions. One was a fierce, disciplined flame, a fighting spirit forged in endless training and iron-willed resolve. B. The fighting-type gym leader of Stow-on-Side, and a master strategist in her own right. The other was a proud, ancient fire, a draconic power passed down through generations. Claire. The dragon-type gym leader from Blackthorn City in Johto, and Lance's own cousin. What was she doing in Galar? A joint training exercise, perhaps. It didn't matter. She was there, and she was fighting. They were powerful. But they were being drowned. Ash turned from the cockpit window, his face set like stone. He walked back into the lounge, where the champions, his Aegis, were preparing for battle, their faces grim but resolved. This isn't a series of small fights, he said, his voice cutting through the tension. This is a war. And we're the reinforcements. He looked at each of them in turn, his gaze holding a weight they had all come to respect. Cynthia, Gita. You two are command. From this jet, you will have a complete overview of the battlefield. Coordinate with Leon. Direct the Gaylor gym leaders. Find the weak points in the enemy's advance. Your battlefield is the map. Both women nodded, their expressions sharp and focused. They immediately moved to the holographic display, their minds already working in sync, processing tactical data. Diantha, Lorelei. Your logistics and civilian protection. Hammerlock is under siege. As soon as we land, you'll coordinate with the local authorities. Evacuation, medical triage, reinforcing the city's defenses. Your battle is to save the people. Diantha's face was determined, her movie star grace replaced by the steely resolve of a leader. Lorelei, for her part, gave a curt, efficient nod, her mind already calculating resource allocation and optimal evacuation routes. She was no longer just an observer, she was a participant. Ash then turned to the final member of their group. Iris. You and I, we're the vanguard. A fierce, wild grin spread across Iris's face. Finally, she said, cracking her knuckles. Time to stop thinking and start fighting. We'll land hard and fast on the front line, Ash continued, his voice low and intense. We're not just going to plug a hole in the line. We're going to be the tip of the spear. We're going to punch through the main enemy force and drive straight for the heart of the swarm. We need to disrupt their command structure, if they even have one. We draw their attention, we sow chaos, and we buy time for everyone else. He looked out the window at the burning battlefield below. This is our gauntlet. Let's show them what happens when they challenge us on our own turf. Pikachu leaped onto his shoulder, a tiny, defiant beacon of electric energy, his cry a miniature war horn. The final battle for Gaylor was about to begin. The jet didn't land so much as it became a stationary gunship. It descended to 1,000 feet above the battlefield, its engines roaring, creating a pocket of relative calm in the chaos. The main ramp slammed down, opening onto a scene of apocalyptic fury. The ground was a maelstrom of shadow and light. B, a blur of motion, fought alongside her Macamp and Graplocked, her precise, powerful strikes shattering shadow constructs that dissolved into dust. Her movements were a brutal dance, each blow perfectly calculated for maximum effect. A short distance away, Claire and her massive Dragonite were a force of nature. Dragonite's hyper beams carved swathes of destruction through the enemy ranks, while Claire herself stood on a rocky outcrop, directing her Kingdra to unleash devastating dragon pulses. They were magnificent. They were champions. And they were losing ground, foot by bloody foot. Ash. Iris. Go. Cynthia's voice crackled through their earpieces. We're marking a weak point in their flank, 2 clicks north of BEA's position. If you can break through there, you can drive a wedge into their main force. We're not going for the flank, Ash said, his eyes locked on the densest part of the fighting, directly in front of B and Claire. Ash, that's suicide. Gita's voice cut in, sharp and analytical. The enemy concentration is highest there. Your force will be shattered. They're the linchpins of the defense, Ash countered, his voice calm and absolute. If they fall, the whole line collapses. We don't reinforce the weak points. We reinforce our strongest points and make them unbreakable. He looked at Iris, a silent question in his eyes. Her grin was feral. Breaking our teeth on the thickest part of the wall. Sounds like my kind of party. Without another word, they jumped. They didn't use ropes. Iris landed gracefully on the back of her Dragonite, which had flown up to meet them. Ash, with Pikachu clinging to his back, was caught by his own Charizard, who he had released mid-air. The 2 mighty dragons let out a defiant roar that cut through the din of battle, announcing the arrival of reinforcements. They hit the ground like a meteor. Iris, take the left. I've got the right. Ash yelled over the roar of combat. What followed was not a battle, it was a storm. Iris became a whirlwind of draconic fury, her Haxorus and Dragonite moving as extensions of her own wild will. She fought with joyous, reckless abandon, laughing as Haxorus's dragon claws tore through shadow constructs. Ash was different. He was the calm center of his own hurricane. Charizard's flamethrower was a focused, cutting beam, not a wide spray, incinerating dozens of shadow creatures with surgical precision. His Surfetch'd moved like a knight, its leek sword a blur of motion, deflecting shadowy attacks and piercing the enemy's unstable cores. And at the heart of it all was Ash, moving with a preternatural calm, his monarch's aura a visible golden sheen around him, a beacon of hope in the encroaching darkness. He didn't just issue commands, he fought alongside them, his bond so deep that his Pokémon anticipated his orders before he even spoke them. Their sudden, ferocious assault punched a hole in the enemy line, giving Bee and Claire a precious moment to breathe. Bee watched them, her brow furrowed. She saw Iris's wild, powerful style and dismissed it as undisciplined. But then she watched Ash. She saw his flawless synergy with his Pokémon, the utter lack of wasted motion, the calm, strategic mind directing the storm. It was a fighting style she had never witnessed before, a perfect fusion of primal power and absolute control. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice sharp and accusatory as Ash's Charizard landed beside her, incinerating a shadowy tyrant rum that was about to overwhelm her Graplocked. "Your tactics are unorthodox and reckless." "They're working," Ash replied simply, not taking his eyes off the enemy. "Your line was about to break. Now it's holding." "Holding is not winning," she retorted, falling into a fighting stance. "Discipline wins battles. Not flashy arrivals." To prove her point, she and her Macamp moved in perfect, synchronized motion, unleashing a flurry of close combat strikes that pulverized a wave of incoming shadows. It was technically flawless. It was also exhausting her Pokémon at an alarming rate. On the other side of their new position, Claire was having a different reaction. Her Dragonite landed beside Ash's Charizard, the two dragons giving each other a nod of mutual respect. "The monarch from Pallet Town," Claire said, her voice holding a note of awe. She was a woman who revered legendary power, and she could feel the aura radiating from Ash. It felt ancient, powerful, and pure. "The stories of your arrival preceded you. I did not expect you to join the fray so directly." "I'm a trainer first," Ash said, gesturing with his head. "The Hammerlock energy plant is their target. We need to protect it at all costs." "My clan has protected the dragon's den for generations," Claire stated, her pride evident. "I know a thing or two about guarding sacred places. My Dragonite and I will hold the line at the main gate. They will not pass." She looked at him, and he saw not just a gym leader, but a guardian. He saw the weight of her heritage, the fierce pride of her lineage. "I'm counting on it," Ash said, and the simple words, filled with the weight of his trust, seemed to bolster her more than any strategic command could have. She nodded, a pact of guardianship formed between them, and directed her dragons to form a defensive perimeter around the plant's entrance. The battle raged. For an hour, they held the line, a small island of defiance against an endless sea of shadows. Ash, Iris, Bee, and Claire became the anchor of the entire Galarian defense. But they were paying a heavy price. Their Pokémon were nearing their limits, the sheer number of enemies grinding them down. "Ash. Status report." Cynthia's voice was tense in his ear. "The enemy is concentrating its forces at your position. They're trying to break you, their primary obstacle. But we've found something. The shadow constructs aren't mindless. There are nodes within the swarm, larger, more powerful constructs that are acting as field commanders, directing the flow of the lesser shadows. If you can take them out, you might disrupt the entire army." On the holographic map, Cynthia highlighted 3 targets, massive energy signatures deep within the enemy ranks. We can't reach them, BEA's voice cut in, strained. She had joined their secure comms channel. We're pinned down. Any attempt to break through would collapse our defensive line. Then we don't break through, Ash said, an idea forming, a wild, reckless gambit. We draw them here. He looked up at the gaping black fissure in the sky, the source of all this chaos. Gita, what's the energy reading on that fissure? Off the charts, Gita replied instantly. It's a direct conduit to, wherever the null resides. It's pure, raw entropic energy. Iris, Ash said, a dangerous glint in his eye. How do you feel about doing something incredibly stupid? Iris's laughter, wild and fierce, crackled over the comms. I thought you'd never ask. Ash turned to B. I need you and Claire to hold this line for 2 minutes. No matter what. Can you do it? B looked at her exhausted Pokémon, then at the unwavering determination in Ash's eyes. He wasn't just giving an order, he was placing his trust in her discipline, in the very quality she valued above all else. We will not break, she said, the words a solemn vow. Good, Ash said. He leaped onto Charizard's back. Iris, with me. We're going up. They shot into the sky, flying not towards the enemy command nodes, but straight up, towards the monstrous black wound in the sky. Ash, what are you doing? Cynthia demanded, her voice laced with alarm. The energy concentrations up there are fatal. The null is drawn to power, Ash yelled over the roaring wind. So we're going to give it a taste of power it can't ignore. They reached the edge of the fissure. The cold was absolute, the same soul-leeching cold he'd felt from the Null-Curum. Raw darkness poured from the tear, a river of non-existence. Below, the 3 command nodes of the Shadow Army stopped their advance, their attention drawn to the 2 dragons and their riders who dared approach their source. Ready, Iris? Ash shouted. Born ready, she roared back. Charizard, flare blitz. Haxorus, outrage. Aim for the center of the fissure. It was the most counterintuitive command imaginable. Attacking the source of the enemy's power. Feeding it. Pikachu. 10 million volt thunderbolt. Iris, sync with me. Pour your dragon energy into my attack. Ash yelled, unleashing his ultimate move. Charizard became a comet of blue-hot fire. Haxorus became a missile of pure red draconic rage. And between them, Pikachu unleashed a torrent of golden, ore-infused lightning, which Iris's own Zekrom-like energy, a gift from her bond with the legendary dragon, wrapped around, turning it into a spiraling vortex of gold and black lightning. The 3 attacks plunged into the heart of the black fissure. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. The fissure didn't shrink. It bloated. It swelled, gorging on the massive, chaotic infusion of raw energy. It was like pouring gasoline onto a grease fire. The fissure pulsed violently, a wave of pure entropic energy washing out. On the ground, the entire Shadow Army froze. Their connection to the fissure, their source of power and consciousness, was suddenly overloaded, like a radio receiver hit with a signal a million times too strong. The 3 command nodes shrieked, a psychic sound of agony, as the feedback loop hit them. They began to flicker and destabilize. Now, B. Claire. Hit the command nodes. All-out attack. Ash roared into the comms. B and Claire didn't hesitate. They seized the opportunity Ash had created for them. Machamp. Graplocked. Dynamic Punch. Dragonite. Kingdra. Draco Meteor. The attacks were devastating. BEA's Pokémon, striking with their last reserves of strength, shattered 2 of the destabilized command nodes. Claire's Draco Meteor, a beautiful and terrible rain of destruction, obliterated the 3rd. The moment the command nodes were destroyed, the Shadow Army collapsed. The psychic link that bound them was severed. The constructs dissolved, one by one, turning into clouds of inert dust that were scattered by the wind. In the space of 30 seconds, the endless tide of shadows had simply vanished. Above, the overloaded fissure began to collapse on itself. The black tear shrank, sputtered, and then sealed shut with a final, silent implosion, leaving behind nothing but the bruised, unnatural sky. The battle was over. They had won. Ash and Iris flew down, their Pokémon exhausted but triumphant. They landed in the midst of the Galarian defenders, who were staring at the empty battlefield in stunned silence. Leon arrived, his Charizard looking battered but relieved, and clasped Ash on the shoulder, a look of profound gratitude on his face. Bea walked up to Ash, her usual stern expression gone, replaced by something else. Awe. Respect. Your strategy, it was insane. Illogical. It violated every known principle of battlefield tactics. She paused, looking at the spot where the enemy command node had been. And it was flawless. You used the enemy's greatest strength, its connection to the fissure, as its greatest weakness. You didn't just outfight them. You outthought them. She gave a stiff, formal bow, a gesture of ultimate respect from a warrior like her. I am in your debt. Claire approached, her pride shining in her eyes. You trusted me to guard the heart of the city, and in turn, you saved us all. A true leader knows not only how to command, but how to trust. The Dragon Clan of Blackthorn would be honored to call you an ally. Ash had earned their respect not by demanding it, but by proving his worth in the crucible of battle. He had shown the warrior his strategic brilliance and the guardian his unwavering faith. The Aegis was growing stronger, its bonds forged in fire and shadow. But as the adrenaline faded, a deep weariness settled over Ash. He looked at his hands. He had channeled his aura, Charizard's fire, and Pikachu's lightning into the heart of the null. And once again, he had felt that cold, void energy seep back into him, a stronger current in the river of his soul. He was winning battles, but he was changing, becoming something he didn't fully understand. Lorelei's voice, quiet and grim, came over the private comm. Ash. The fissure is closed. But my long-range sensors picked up a final burst of data from it just before it collapsed. A highly compressed, encrypted data packet. It wasn't sent to the null. It was sent from the null, to Shiraz. It wasn't just a report. It had the characteristics of a summons. A cold dread settled in Ash's stomach, colder than any fissure. Shiraz wasn't just guiding the null anymore. The null was now guiding him. The puppet master had just been given his own set of strings. Chapter 6, The Oracle of Hoenn. The silence in the aftermath of the battle was more profound than the roar of combat had ever been. Galar's sky, once a bruised and torn canvas, was slowly healing, the sickly purple fading back to a familiar overcast gray. The ground, littered with the dissipating dust of the Shadow Army, bore the scars of their desperate defense. Ash stood on the battlements of Hammerlock, looking out over the now empty plains of the wild area. The cold was gone, but the memory of it lingered, a phantom limb of a wound on the world itself. His Aegis was assembled. Cynthia and Gita were on the ground now, coordinating with Leon and the Galar League to manage the cleanup and control the narrative. The official story was a massive, spontaneous Dynamax energy surge, a wild area storm, that had been successfully contained. It was a lie, but a necessary one to hold back a tide of global panic. Diantha and Lorelei were overseeing relief efforts, their logistical genius turning chaos into order. Bea and Claire, their Pokémon now recovering, stood near Ash. They weren't talking, simply sharing the quiet companionship of soldiers after a victory. Iris was leaning against a Merlin, her Axu chittering happily on her shoulder as she tossed it a berry, her wild energy for once subdued into a watchful calm. They were all there, a council of champions forged in the heat of impossible battles. They had won. They had saved Galar. But it felt like a hollow victory. "We're always one step behind," Ash said, his voice quiet but carrying to the others. "We stop a sabotage, they launch an invasion. We stop an invasion, and they, what? What's next? Sheraz has been summoned, Lorelai's voice came through their earpieces. She was still in the jet, her command center, analyzing the final data burst from the fissure. The data packet from the null was not a set of instructions. It was a set of coordinates and a temporal key. A rendezvous point. In space and time. Where? Gita asked, joining the group on the battlements. That's the problem, Lorelai replied, a note of frustration in her voice. The coordinate system doesn't match any known cartographical or astronomical charts. It's non-Euclidean, based on a form of geometry my systems can't even model. And the temporal key, it's not a date. It's a condition. The rendezvous is set to occur when the two eyes align and the serpent sleeps. A heavy silence fell over the group. It was a riddle. A line from a forgotten prophecy, not a piece of actionable intelligence. This is no longer a problem we can solve with strength or strategy alone, Cynthia said, her expression deeply troubled. She had been poring over a collection of digital scrolls and texts downloaded from the Canalave library, her face illuminated by the glow of her datapad. The null is a being of cosmic principle, and Sheraz is now interacting with it on that level. We're fighting a physical war, but the real conflict is happening in a metaphysical space we don't understand. She looked up, her gray eyes meeting Ash's. The legends of the monarch are fragmented, but they all contain a similar thread. When faced with a foe that transcended the physical, the monarch did not seek a stronger sword, but a clearer eye. He sought a seer. An oracle. An oracle. Be scoffed, her pragmatism returning. You're suggesting we go looking for a fortune teller? Not a fortune teller, Cynthia corrected patiently. A keeper of lore. Someone whose knowledge base isn't science or history, but myth and oral tradition. The line Lorelai intercepted, when the two eyes align and the serpent sleeps, that's not a code to be broken. It's a verse from a story. We need to find the person who knows the rest of the story. And where do we find this person? Diantha asked, her voice tinged with skepticism. Cynthia brought up a new image on her datapad. It was a simple, stylized drawing of a bird, elegant and ancient. This symbol was found alongside the earliest mentions of the monarch in Sinoa's archives. It predates the cults of Dialga and Palkia. It's the symbol of an ancestral line of mystics from the Hoenn region, a line charged with observing the heavens and keeping the great balance between the land, the sea, and the sky. Groudon, Kyogre, and Rayquaza, Ash breathed, recognizing the dynamic. Precisely, Cynthia confirmed. While the rest of Hoenn built their myths around those three titans, this lineage focused on the architecture that kept them in balance. Their knowledge is said to be different. More fundamental. She zoomed in on the map of Hoenn, to a city built amongst the treetops. For Tree City. The line has dwindled, but the last known descendant lives there. She is the current gym leader. Winona, Iris said, a flicker of recognition in her eyes. The bird user. I met her once at a conference. She seemed distant. Like she was listening to a conversation no one else could hear. That's our oracle, Ash said, a new resolve cutting through his weariness. She's the one who can translate the riddle. She's the key. He looked at his assembled champions. They were warriors, strategists, diplomats. But this next phase of the war wouldn't be fought on a battlefield. It would be fought in the pages of a forgotten story. We go to Hoenn. For Tree City was a breath of fresh air, a literal and spiritual cleansing after the oppressive gloom of Galar. The city was a marvel of engineering and harmony, a collection of massive wooden huts and rope bridges built into the canopy of a colossal, ancient forest. The air was clean, filled with the scent of rain-soaked leaves and the chorus of bird Pokémon. They found Winona not in her gym, but in a quiet, secluded treehouse on the highest branch of the city, a place that served as both her home and a celestial observatory. The roof was a marvel of polished lenses and brass instruments, all pointed at the sky. Winona was as Iris had described. Elegant and poised, with striking blue hair that matched her flight suit. She moved with an airy grace, and her eyes, when she turned to greet them, seemed to look through them rather than at them. She was surrounded by her Pokémon, a majestic Swellow, a graceful Pelipper, and a powerful Skarmory, who watched the newcomers with intelligent, cautious eyes. But her Altaria, a creature of downy clouds and draconic grace, had its eyes fixed solely on Ash. It let out a soft, humming cry, a note of pure, resonant harmony that seemed to quiet the very air. "The monarch who walks in shadow and light," Winona said, her voice soft as a breeze, but carrying an unnerving clarity. She wasn't looking at Ash, she was looking at his aura, at the threads of gold and black that now defined him. And his aegis of queens. "I have been expecting you." There was no shock, no need for explanation. It was clear that Winona perceived the world on a level that made their cosmic struggle painfully obvious. "The sky has been weeping," she continued, turning her gaze to the heavens. "The great celestial harmonies are out of tune. A discordant note of pure silence has entered the song of creation. And the human man, blinded by ambition, seeks to conduct it." "Sheraz," Cynthia stated. Winona nodded. "You come seeking the lyrics to a song you have only heard a whisper of. When the two eyes align and the serpent sleeps." "You know what it means," Ash said, stepping forward. "It is not a prophecy of a time," Winona explained, her gaze still fixed on the sky. "It is a prophecy of a place. A condition. It is the final verse of the Lay of the Sky Pillar, the oldest story of my people." She led them inside her home, a circular room filled not with furniture, but with star charts, ancient scrolls, and artifacts that hummed with a quiet power. She unrolled a massive scroll onto a low table. It was a complex, beautiful star map, but one utterly alien to them. Our ancestors did not see the world as land and sea. They saw it as a tapestry of energies. "Lines of power that connect all things," she said, her finger tracing patterns on the map. They believed the great titans were not gods, but living embodiments of these lines. Groudon, the line of the planet's fiery heart. Kyogre, the line of its deep, dreaming oceans. And Rayquaza, her finger traced a serpentine path that coiled around the entire map, is the line that binds them all. The great atmospheric current, the world's immune system. The sleeping serpent. And the two eyes? Lorelei asked, her scientific mind struggling to translate the poetic language into data. Winona pointed to two specific points on the map. One was a familiar landmark, the sky pillar itself, Rayquaza's ancient roost. The other was a location deep in the ocean off the coast of Setopolis City. The seafloor cavern. The place where Kyogre slumbers. Our legends call them the Eye of the Sky and the Eye of the Deep. The prophecy does not speak of a literal alignment. It means a harmonic resonance. The rendezvous will occur when the latent energies of the sky pillar and the seafloor cavern are brought into perfect sync. Sheraz is going to trigger an energy resonance between the two locations, Gita deduced, the strategic implications clicking into place. But why? To what end? To open a door, Winona said, her expression becoming grave. The sky pillar is more than just a roost for a legendary Pokémon. It is a key. A tuning fork for the energies of the planet. The Lay of the Sky Pillar says that when the tower's harmony is matched to the Song of the Deep, it does not just call to the serpent. It unlocks the path to the one who wrote the song. A chilling silence fell over the room as the pieces fell into place. "The Hall of Origin," Cynthia whispered, her voice filled with awe and terror. "Arceus's realm. The conceptual heart of reality, where the laws of the universe are written." "Sheraz isn't just trying to control the null," Ash said, the full, horrifying scope of the plan crashing down on him. "He's trying to take it to the source. He's going to use the null's entropic power to try and, what? Erase Arceus? Rewrite reality to his own design. The ambition was so immense, so blasphemous, it was almost impossible to comprehend. He wasn't just trying to take over the Pokémon League. He was attempting to usurp the throne of God itself. "We have to stop him," Diantha said, her voice shaking slightly. "If he succeeds, he won't," a new voice said. It was cold, logical, and it came from everywhere at once. It wasn't a sound. It was a thought, projected into the minds of everyone in the room. A wave of pure, dispassionate intellect that made the world feel small and insignificant. The air in the room grew cold, the vibrant life of Fortree City seeming to recede into a distant hum. Ash felt the thread of the null inside him resonate, a tuning fork struck by its master's call. He looked around wildly, but there was nothing there. "Who are you?" he projected back, using his own burgeoning telepathic abilities. "I am the balance," the voice replied, its tone utterly devoid of emotion. "I am the correction. The being you have been fighting is but an echo, a shadow I cast upon your world. You stand in the presence of the null itself." The pressure in the room intensified. It felt like being at the bottom of the deepest ocean. The very concepts of color, warmth, and life seemed to be muted, suppressed by this overwhelming presence of pure, ordered nothingness. The man, Sheraz, is an anomaly. A flawed variable. His ambition is a chaotic algorithm that threatens the system's stability. He believes he is my master. He is merely a tool I have allowed to function, for he is leading me to the ultimate source of the instability, the first anomaly. The prime variable. Arceus. The entity's cold, logical pronouncements were more terrifying than any monstrous roar. This wasn't a villain. It was a universal principle that had gained a voice. "But you," the voice focused, and Ash felt its full, undivided attention settle on him. It was like being examined under a microscope by a god. "You are an unexpected development. The Monarch. A second-order anomaly. You have integrated a fragment of my own essence. You are a paradox, a being of creation who wields the logic of erasure. This is interesting. What do you want?" Ash demanded, his hands clenched into fists, his own aura flaring in defiance against the crushing pressure. "I have observed your actions," the null continued, ignoring his question. "You bring order to chaos. You restore what has been broken. Your function appears to be similar to my own, though your methods are sentimental. Inefficient. You fight to preserve a flawed system." The entity paused, a moment of consideration that felt like an eternity. "I am presenting you with a new protocol. A choice." Suddenly, the world outside the treehouse vanished. They were no longer in Fortree City. They were standing in a space of pure, sterile white, an infinite void just as Dr. Abel had described. In front of them, an image formed, a projection of Earth, floating in the emptiness. Option 1, the voice stated, as a shadowy, fractal shape began to envelop the projected planet. "You stand aside. I will proceed with my primary function. I will use the human tool to access the Hall of Origin, and I will correct the first anomaly. I will erase the concept of Arceus. The universe will be rendered stable, predictable, and perfect. Your world, as a consequence, will cease to exist as you know it. Its fundamental laws will be rewritten. Individuality, emotion, chaos, these are all bugs in the system. They will be patched. The image of the Earth dissolved into a perfect, crystalline sphere, beautiful and utterly lifeless." The champions gasped in horror. Option 2, the voice continued, and the image of the vibrant, living Earth returned. "You, Monarch, are a unique case. Your paradoxical nature makes you a potential asset. You have proven you can absorb and control my essence without collapsing. Therefore, I offer you an alternative. Surrender your power to me. Willingly. Allow me to seal the Monarch's aura and the chaotic life force it represents. Your world will be spared. The system will be allowed to continue with its flaws, quarantined from the rest of reality. I will cease my corrective actions, as the primary anomaly, your power, will have been neutralized. The offer hung in the air, a terrible, logical ultimatum. Give up the power that was defining him, the very thing that allowed him to fight, and in exchange, the world would be saved from the null. Or refuse, and condemn the world to be perfected into a sterile, lifeless crystal. You're asking him to surrender, Iris snarled, her hand on a pokeball. To give up. We would rather fight and die. Your emotional response is a predicted variable, the null replied, its tone unchanging. It is illogical. The monarch's power is a cancer. My offer is to remove the cancer and spare the patient. The alternative is to let the cancer spread until I am forced to sterilize the entire operating theater. The white void began to fade, the familiar wooden walls of Winona's home resolving back into existence around them. The crushing presence receded, leaving behind a lingering chill and an impossible choice. The aegis was shattered. Not by an attack, but by an idea. A horribly, terrifyingly reasonable idea. Gita, the pragmatist, looked pale. To remove the variable, to save the whole, from a purely strategic standpoint, she couldn't finish the sentence, but her meaning was clear. The offer was logical. Lorelei pushed her glasses up, her face a mask of conflict. The data is compelling. The entity's premise is sound, assuming its stated goals are truthful. The risk of total reality alteration versus the guaranteed survival of our current reality, at the cost of one individual's power, don't you dare. B snapped, her hand clenched into a white-knuckled fist. We do not surrender. We fight. That is the only way. Fighting is pointless if it ensures our own annihilation. Gita shot back, her composure cracking. This isn't a battle we can win. It's a cosmic force. So we just roll over. Let it take Ash's power, let it win. Iris yelled, her Haxorus growling in agreement. Diantha held her hands up, trying to be the peacemaker, but her own face was a canvas of doubt and fear. We need to consider all the options. What if it's telling the truth? Is Ash's power worth risking the entire world? They were arguing, their unity, their greatest strength, fractured by the null's simple, devastatingly effective gambit. It hadn't attacked them with an army. It had attacked them with a moral dilemma. Ash stood in the center of it all, silent. The weight of the choice was his alone. He looked at his friends, his champions, his aegis, torn apart by the very enemy they had sworn to fight. He felt their fear, their doubt, their anger. He felt the cold logic of the null's offer, a seductive whisper in the back of his mind. It's the safest path. Give it up. Save them all. He was at his lowest point. He was no longer a monarch leading a charge. He was just a boy from Pallet Town, holding the fate of reality in his hands, and every option felt like a betrayal. Chapter 7, The Aegis divided. The Treehouse Observatory, once a place of tranquil wisdom, had become a pressure cooker. The lingering chill of the null's presence was gone, but it had left behind a poison of its own, doubt. The argument raged, a wildfire of logic against instinct, pragmatism against pride. The champions, who had stood as a united front against armies of shadow and gods of entropy, were now turning on each other, their alliance cracking under the weight of an impossible choice. It is the only logical course of action. Gita argued, her voice sharp, her composure stripped away to reveal the raw, pragmatic core of La Primera. We are facing an entity that can rewrite reality. It has offered us an out, a deal that guarantees the survival of our world as we know it. To reject that out of pride or a misplaced sense of fighting spirit is not bravery, it is strategic malpractice. And you call surrender a strategy? Be countered, her fists clenched, her knuckles white. She paced the circular room like a caged tiger. We have faced down every threat it has thrown at us. We have proven that we can fight it, that we can win. To give up now, to hand our greatest weapon, to hand Ash, over to the enemy, it's cowardice. It is not a weapon, it is a liability. Lorelei interjected, her voice tight with the strain of her own internal conflict. She was polishing her glasses with a frantic energy, a nervous tick Ash had never seen before. The null's own logic is sound. The monarch's aura is the anomaly. It is the irritant causing the cosmic allergic reaction. If removing the irritant saves the body, then any competent physician would make that choice. Emotion has no place in this calculation. Emotion is all we have. Iris roared, jumping to her feet, her axu bristling on her shoulder. This thing, this null, it wants a world without feeling, without passion, without chaos. It wants a world of perfect, boring, dead order. Giving in to its logic is letting it win the war for our soul without it having to fire another shot. I would rather our world burn to ash, fighting, than let it be hollowed out into some sterile crystal. Diantha stood between the warring factions, her face a mask of torment. Please, she pleaded, her voice strained. We cannot afford to tear ourselves apart. There has to be a way to look at this, but her words trailed off. She, the diplomat, the one who could always find the common ground, could see none here. The choice was binary. A world without Ash's power, or risking a world without existence. Ash stood apart from it all, near the open archway that looked out over the forest canopy. He listened to their arguments, to the voices of the most powerful women in the world, his friends, his aegis, as they debated the value of his existence. Each word was a blow. Gita's logic was a cold, sharp blade. Lorelei's data-driven conclusion felt like a clinical diagnosis of a terminal illness. Bee and Iris's fiery defiance was a shield, but a shield he knew was forged from emotion, not from a plan. He felt a profound, crushing loneliness. The power that hummed in his veins, the monarch's aura, had never felt more like a curse. It was a crown of thorns, and its weight was forcing him to his knees. The null's offer echoed in his mind, a siren song of simplicity. Give it up. End their fighting. Save them. It's the heroic thing to do. He could feel the path to surrender. He could feel how to consciously sever his connection to the world's life force, to let the golden river within him run dry. It would be an agony unlike any other, a spiritual death, but it would be simple. It would be an end. He looked down at his hands, at the hands that had held legendary Pokémon, that had commanded armies, that had absorbed the very essence of the void. And he saw them as a liability. A cancer. Maybe they're right, he said, his voice barely a whisper. The arguing stopped. Every eye in the room snapped to him. He turned to face them, and they saw not the confident monarch of the battlefield, but a young man buckling under an impossible burden. His shoulders were slumped. The golden light in his eyes was dim, flickering. Maybe it's the only way, he said, his voice hollow. If my power is what's causing all this, if me giving it up means everyone is safe, then what choice is there? How many more cities have to be attacked? How many more people have to be hurt? All because of me. He wasn't looking for their approval. He was resigning himself to his fate. This was his lowest point, a surrender not to the null, but to despair. Pikachu, sensing the shift in him, let out a desperate, questioning cry, nudging his head against Ash's cheek, but Ash didn't seem to notice. No, a calm, steady voice said, cutting through the silence. Cynthia stepped forward, her book forgotten, her datapad off. Her expression was not one of pity, but of profound, unwavering strength. She walked to Ash, stopping directly in front of him, her gray eyes locking onto his. Do not let it poison you with its logic, she said, her voice low but resonant. The null sees the world as a system of variables to be balanced. It is incapable of understanding the one variable that makes life worth living, choice. It has given you a false dilemma, a choice between two forms of erasure. That is its nature. But it is not yours. She reached out and gently took his hand. Her touch was warm, grounding. Look at me, Ash. You are not a liability. You are not a cancer. You are the one who stood on a battlefield and cleansed a Pokémon's soul with compassion. You are the one who faced down an army not with brute force, but with a gambit so brilliant it turned the enemy's strength into its own undoing. You are the one who took the void into yourself and did not break. Her gaze softened, and for the first time, he saw not just the scholar or the champion, but the person. He saw the woman who had devoted her life to understanding the world's deepest truths, and who now saw one of those truths standing right in front of her. The monarch's power did not choose you because you were the strongest, she said, her voice dropping to an intimate whisper. It chose you because of your heart. Because in 1,000 crises, when others saw only monsters to be defeated, you saw friends to be saved. The null cannot comprehend that. It sees your power as the anomaly, but it's wrong. Your character is the anomaly. And that is something you can never surrender. Her words were a lifeline. They pulled him back from the edge of the abyss, a spark of the golden flame reigniting in the darkness of his despair. He looked past Cynthia, at the others. Iris was the next to approach, her usual fiery demeanor replaced by a raw, quiet intensity. She stood beside Cynthia, her gaze fierce. She's right. When I first met you, I thought you were an arrogant fool trying to play God. But then I saw you on that road. You took a hit for my Haxorus. You didn't even hesitate. A real dragon doesn't fight because it's logical. It fights to protect its own. She punched his shoulder, not hard, but with a firm, grounding thud. We're your own, Ash. So stop talking like a coward and start acting like the dragon I know you are. Diantha moved to his other side, her eyes filled with a rediscovered conviction. Forgive me, Ash. We were so caught up in the fear, in the scale of the threat, that we lost sight of what's truly important. She smiled, a sad but beautiful expression. In my world, heroes are written into scripts. They are idealized versions of courage. But you are real. Your courage is messy, and reckless, and profoundly human. I would rather place my faith in that messy humanity than in any cold, logical deal with a monster. One by one, they came to him, their earlier division forgotten, their unity reforged around him, not as a leader to be obeyed, but as a friend to be protected. Bee stood before him, her arms crossed, but her stance was no longer confrontational. My entire life has been dedicated to the pursuit of strength through discipline. I saw your power as another form of strength to be analyzed. I was wrong. Her gaze was direct, unflinching. Your true strength is not your aura. It is your will. The will to stand when every odd is against you. That is a power the null cannot measure. And it is a power I will follow. Gita, the last holdout of pragmatism, looked at the faces of her fellow champions, at their absolute, renewed faith. She looked at Ash, at the light slowly returning to his eyes. Her own logical mind had led her down a path of cold, hard choice. But there was data she had failed to account for, the immeasurable variable of the human spirit. My assessment was incomplete, she said, the admission costing her a visible effort. I analyzed the threat and the proposed solutions, but I failed to properly quantify the asset. She met Ash's eyes. And you, Monarch, are the single greatest asset on this board. My logic was sound, but my premise was flawed. Surrender is no longer a viable strategic option. Lorelei, watching from the edge of the group, slowly pushed her glasses up her nose. The emotional consensus of the group presents a new, compelling data point, she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. But there was a hint of a smile on her lips. The hypothesis that surrender is the optimal path appears to be refuted. Ash looked at them all, his Aegis, his queens, his friends. They had been divided, and they had found their way back, not because of his power, but because of their faith in him as a person. The loneliness that had crushed him moments before was gone, replaced by a warmth that had nothing to do with the monarch's aura. It was the warmth of belonging. The null had offered him a choice between two types of surrender. But Cynthia was right. It was a false choice. There's a third option, Ash said, his voice no longer hollow, but filled with a new, quiet fire. He looked at Winona, who had been watching the entire exchange with a serene, knowing smile. The Null thinks it's hunting Arceus. It thinks it's in control. But it's walking into a trap of its own making. He turned to the rest of the group, his eyes now blazing with their full golden light. We don't surrender the power. And we don't let the Null win. We change the rules of the game. He took a deep, steadying breath, his mind racing, a new, insane, impossible plan forming from the ashes of his despair. It was a gambit that made the attack on the Galar Fisher look like a training exercise. The Null is a being of pure entropy, right? A force of cosmic balance. It's not evil, it's just doing its job. The problem is, it sees me, and by extension, Arceus, as a fundamental imbalance, a bug in the system. Ash began, pacing now, his energy returning, infectious. Its goal is to correct that imbalance by erasure. But what if the answer isn't erasure? What if the answer is equilibrium? He stopped, looking at them, his eyes wide with the sheer audacity of his own idea. I don't fight the Null, he said. I don't surrender to it. I become its equal. I become its opposite. It is the pillar of entropy. I will become the pillar of creation. The champion stared at him, dumbfounded. What are you talking about? Iris asked. You want to become a god? No, Ash said, shaking his head. Not a god. A law. A fundamental principle. The Null isn't a person, it's a force. I need to become a force to balance it. Right now, the monarch's aura is just a wellspring of life energy. It's chaotic. Unstructured. That's why the Null sees it as a cancer. I need to give it structure. Give it purpose. I need to consciously forge myself into a new, stable pillar of reality. And how, exactly, do you propose to do that? Lorelei asked, her scientific curiosity overriding her shock. The Hall of Origin, Ash said, his gaze turning to Cynthia. Shiraz is opening the door for us. That's our chance. Inside the conceptual heart of reality, I won't fight the Null. I will, merge with it. Not in surrender, but in synthesis. Ash, that's insane. Diantha gasped. You'd be torn apart. You'd be absorbing the entirety of its being. I won't be absorbing it, he corrected, a wild, brilliant light in his eyes. I'll be harmonizing with it. I already have a piece of it inside me. He held up his hand, and for the first time, he showed them. He let the golden aura flare, but he also called upon the dark thread, the cold sliver of the void. A wisp of pure black, light-devouring energy coiled around his golden glowing fingers. I can already wield both creation and entropy. I just need to do it on a cosmic scale. I will become the anchor that stabilizes the Null, transforming it from a corrective force of erasure into a balancing force of stillness. Life and death. Sound and silence. Creation and entropy. A new, perfect equilibrium. It was a plan born of sheer, desperate genius. A gambit that aimed not to defeat the enemy, but to redeem it, to incorporate it into a new, more stable reality. It was a plan that could only have come from Ash Ketchum. The risk was absolute. If he failed, his consciousness, his very soul, would be annihilated, dissolved into the void. He wouldn't just die, he would cease to have ever existed. He looked at his queens, at their shocked, terrified, and awestruck faces. It's the only way, he said, his voice now calm and certain. It's a 1 in a billion shot. It could cost me everything. But it's our shot. I can't do it alone. I'll need you. All of you. To get me there. To protect me while I do whatever it is I have to do. To be my anchor to reality if I start to slip. Silence. The sheer, terrifying scale of his proposal hung in the air. Then, one by one, they nodded. Their faith in him, reforged and now absolute, burned brighter than ever. They would follow him into the heart of reality itself. The lay of the sky pillar tells of how to open the path, Winona said, her voice filled with a quiet reverence. But it also warns that only one with a heart in perfect balance can walk it. It seems you have found your balance, monarch. She smiled. Your gambit is terrifying. And beautiful. Let us show you the way. The Aegis was no longer divided. It was united, not just by loyalty, but by a shared, insane purpose. They were going to war. With the fundamental laws of the universe. And their king, the boy who had fallen into despair, now stood as a beacon of impossible hope, ready to make his final, desperate stand. Chapter 8, The Monarch and His Queens. The summit of Mount Coronet was a place outside of time. The air was thin and razor-sharp, and the sky was a deep, star-dusted indigo that felt close enough to touch. Snow-dusted ruins, ancient and weathered by millennia of silent vigil, circled the peak. This was the spear pillar, the altar where time and space converged, the closest point in the mortal world to the divine. Ash stood at the center of the ruins, the wind whipping his jacket, his expression serene. The frantic energy of his revelation in Hoenn had settled into a deep, profound calm. He knew what he had to do. The path was clear, a single, terrifying line drawn through the heart of reality. Pikachu was a warm, steady presence on his shoulder, his tiny body thrumming with a quiet, shared resolve. His Aegis stood with him, a circle of silent power against the vast, uncaring cosmos. They had moved with breathtaking speed. Winona had provided the celestial charts. Gita and Lorelei had calculated the precise moment of the harmonic resonance between Hoenn's sky pillar and seafloor cavern. Diantha had used her global network to create a worldwide media blackout, preventing Sheraz from turning his blasphemous act into a public spectacle. Bee, Iris, and Claire, the warriors, had prepared their teams for the battle to end all battles. And Cynthia, the scholar who had started it all, stood beside Ash, holding a simple, elegant flute carved from what looked like polished sky. The azure flute. He's begun, Winona said, her eyes closed. She was not with them on the mountain but was linked via their private comms from her observatory, her senses attuned to the planet's energy flows. Sheraz is at the sky pillar. He is using a network of amplifiers to broadcast a low-frequency energy pulse. The resonance is building. The eye of the sky is opening. As if on cue, a low, subsonic hum filled the air around Spear Pillar, a vibration that resonated deep in their bones. The very stones of the ancient ruins began to glow with a faint internal light. The null is gathering, Ash said, his gaze distant. He could feel it. A vast, silent presence massing just outside the borders of their reality, drawn by the signal, ready to pour through the door Sheraz was about to open. It is time, Cynthia said, her voice steady despite the world-shaking gravity of the moment. She handed the azure flute to Ash. The legends say the flute is not played with breath, but with spirit. You must play the song of creation, the melody that Arceus first used to shape the world. You must pour your aura into it. Ash took the flute. It was cool to the touch, but as his fingers wrapped around it, it pulsed with a gentle warmth. He didn't know the song of creation. No one did. But he didn't need to. The monarch's aura, the life force of the world itself, knew the melody by heart. He brought the flute to his lips. He didn't blow. He closed his eyes and let the golden river of power flow from his very soul into the instrument. A sound emerged. It was not a note, but a chord of impossible beauty and complexity, a sound that contained the whisper of the first wind, the crash of the first wave, the cry of the first living creature. The light from the stones of Spear Pillar intensified, coalescing, weaving together in the air above them. The fabric of reality began to thin, becoming translucent, revealing a shimmering, ethereal staircase that spiraled up into a void of pure, white light. The path to the Hall of Origin. But as the final steps of the stairway formed, a second sound tore through the air. A discordant, grating hum. On the far side of the pillar, reality buckled and tore open. It wasn't the clean, melodic opening Ash had created, but a jagged, violent rip, a wound of black energy. From this tear, two figures emerged. The first was Sheraz. He was no longer the stern, well-dressed League official. His suit was gone, replaced by a strange, form-fitting black armor that seemed to be made of solidified shadow. His eyes glowed with a cold, blue light, and his face was a mask of triumphant, insane ambition. The second figure was the Null. It manifested not as a monster, but as a perfect, silent sphere of absolute blackness, a hole in the world that floated behind Sheraz's shoulder. It drank the light, it drank the sound, its very presence a negation of all things. Behold, Monarch! Sheraz's voice boomed, electronically distorted by his helmet. The glorious dawn of a new, perfect world. I have harnessed the ultimate corrective tool. The age of chaotic, flawed gods is over. The age of man, of perfect order, begins now. He raised a hand, and the black sphere pulsed. From it, tendrils of pure void lashed out, striking the ethereal staircase. The beautiful, melodic structure flickered and began to dissolve, the notes of creation silenced by the chord of entropy. He's trying to collapse the path. Cynthia yelled. He won't succeed, Ash said calmly. He held the flute high. This is where our paths diverge. Get me to the top of that staircase. The rest is up to me. He looked at his champions, his trust absolute. This is it. Don't hold back. We won't, Bee said, her voice a low growl of anticipation. A wall of power erupted from the 8 women. Pokeballs flew, and in a blaze of light, a pantheon of legendary strength materialized. Cynthia's Garchomp, Diantha's Gardevoir, Gita's Glimmera, Iris's Haxorus, Bea's Macamp, Claire's Dragonite, Lorelei's Lapras, and Winona, through a miracle of remote technology and Diantha's resources, projecting a solid-light version of her Skarmory onto the battlefield. It was an army of queens and their aces, a living embodiment of the world's defiant will to live. The future of our world is not for you to decide, Sheraz. Diantha declared, her mega charm flaring as her Gardevoir transformed into its angelic, powerful mega form. You have meddled with forces beyond your comprehension, Cynthia stated, her Garchomp letting out a roar that shook the mountain. Your perfect order is a prison, Iris spat. And we're about to tear it down. The final battle began. It was a conflict on 2 fronts. Ash, with Pikachu on his shoulder, ran for the dissolving staircase, pouring his aura into the azure flute, the song of creation a desperate, defiant shield against the Null's encroaching silence. He had to keep the path open. His Aegis engaged the enemy. Their fight was not just with Sheraz, but with the Null itself. The black sphere was not a passive observer. As the champions and their Pokémon launched their attacks, the sphere would pulse, and from it, new shadow constructs would emerge, perfect, nightmarish counters to their own Pokémon. A shadowy, impossibly fast Weevil to hairy Garchomp. A spectral Aegis lash that met Gardevoir's psychic blasts with shields of pure void. A glitching, multi-headed Hydreigon that descended from the black tear to challenge the assembled dragons. Sheraz fought with the terrifying power of his new armor. He moved with unnatural speed, firing bolts of entropic energy from his gauntlets, his tactics cold, efficient, and brutal. He was no longer just a man, he was a high priest of the void. The battle was a symphony of glorious, desperate chaos. Gita and Lorelei coordinated the attacks, their analytical minds finding patterns in the Null's deployment of constructs. Iris, Claire, coordinated Dragon Rush on the Hydreigon's left flank. Its energy matrix is unstable there. Lorelei commanded, her voice crisp and clear over the comms. Bee and her Macamp engaged Sheraz directly in a brutal physical confrontation, a dance of discipline against overwhelming power. Diantha's Gardevoir and Cynthia's Garchomp fought as a seamless unit, psychic power and raw physical might overwhelming the shadowy abominations. But for every construct they destroyed, the black sphere created two more. They were fighting a war of attrition against an enemy with infinite reserves. They weren't trying to win. They were buying Ash time, inch by precious inch. Ash reached the base of the staircase. He could feel his queens fighting for him, their burning spirits a fortress at his back. He took the first step, and the world dissolved into a cacophony of sound and light. The staircase was not just a path, it was a journey through the conceptual history of the universe. He ran, the song of creation pouring from him, each step taking him past echoes of dying stars, birthing galaxies, and the formation of worlds. He was halfway up when he felt a tremor in the force behind him. He glanced back. A massive construct, a shadowy effigy of Eternatus, had emerged from the tier and unleashed a devastating beam of entropic energy. Claire's Dragonite, moving to intercept a blow meant for Gita's Glimera, had taken the full force of the blast. The mighty dragon cried out and fell from the sky, not unconscious, but fading. Its body was turning translucent, its life force being erased. Claire screamed, a sound of pure agony. Ash faltered. The melody from the flute wavered. The staircase flickered violently. The sight of his friend's pain, of her partner being unwritten from existence, was a dagger in his soul. Ash, don't stop. Cynthia's voice, tight with strain, echoed in his mind. We knew there would be sacrifices. Do not let them be in vain. Keep going. He tore his eyes away, his heart breaking, and forced himself to run, the notes of the song now tinged with his own sorrow. He was near the top. The entrance to the Hall of Origin was a shimmering white portal just ahead. But the battle below had reached a fever pitch. His queens were being overwhelmed. Their Pokémon were falling, not to defeat, but to erasure. He felt their strength flagging, their lights dimming. He knew they couldn't hold on much longer. He wasn't going to make it. We believe in you, Ash. It wasn't a single voice. It was a chorus. A wave of pure, unadulterated faith, sent from his 8 champions. They were pouring their own energy, their own will, their own spirits into him. They were becoming his anchors, his tethers to the world he was trying to save. Diantha's unwavering belief in his character. Iris's fierce, wild loyalty. Cynthia's profound faith in his destiny. Bea's hard-won respect for his will. Gita's calculated trust in his competence. Lorelei's analytical acceptance of his power. Claire's noble devotion. Winona's serene wisdom. The combined force of their belief surged into him, a tidal wave of spiritual power. The monarch's aura inside him erupted, a supernova of golden light. The song from the flute became a triumphant, world-shaking anthem. The dissolving staircase solidified, blazing with a light so bright it momentarily pushed back the shadows below. He took the final step and plunged into the white portal. He was in the Hall of Origin. It was not a hall. It was a space of infinite potential, a silent, swirling nexus of light where thought became reality. And waiting for him were 2 beings. One was Arceus, a creature of majestic, radiant light, its 1,000 arms unseen but felt as a constant, benevolent presence. It was bound, ensnared in shimmering, shadowy chains forged by the Null's power. The other was the black sphere of the Null itself, which had followed him through the portal. Shiraz was gone, his purpose served. This was the final confrontation. You have arrived, anomaly, the Null projected, its presence here 1,000 times more powerful. You cannot win. This is the heart of the system. Here, my logic is absolute. I'm not here to win, Ash said, his voice echoing in the timeless space. I'm here to balance the equation. He didn't draw a pokeball. He opened his arms wide, a gesture of complete vulnerability. He let go of the flute, which dissolved into motes of light. And he opened his aura. But he didn't just release the golden light of creation. He also unleashed the dark, silent thread of the void he carried within him. He held them both in his hands, a sun of life and a black hole of entropy. A paradox, the null stated, a hint of what might have been confusion in its cold logic. You cannot contain both. They will annihilate you. They won't annihilate me, Ash said, a serene smile on his face. They are me. He stepped forward and did the unthinkable. He didn't fight the null. He embraced it. He pushed his hands, holding both creation and erasure, directly into the sphere of absolute blackness. The agony was cosmic. His consciousness was torn in a billion directions at once. The roaring bonfire of life from the monarch's aura fought against the absolute, silent zero of the null. It was a war for his very soul, fought on the battlefield of his own identity. He felt his memories dissolving, his sense of self being unwritten. He was fading. He was becoming nothing. And then he felt them. 8 points of light in the infinite darkness. Tethers. Anchors. His queens. Their faith, their belief in him, was a rope holding him back from the abyss. He clung to their presence, to the memory of their faces, their voices, their spirits. He didn't fight the null's power. He harmonized with it. He used the rhythm of his own beating heart, amplified by the faith of his friends, to give the null's silent, entropic energy a pulse. He used the golden light of creation to give the void form and structure. In the heart of the Hall of Origin, a new Big Bang occurred. A silent, blinding flash of pure, balanced energy, a perfect fusion of gold and black, of light and shadow. When the light faded, Ash was still standing there. But he was changed. His familiar jacket was gone, replaced by a simple, flowing black coat lined with gold. The golden aura of the monarch was no longer just gold, it was laced with swirling, beautiful threads of shadow, like a galaxy of stars against a night sky. The power was no longer a chaotic river. It was a calm, fathomless ocean. He was no longer just a conduit. He was the source. The null was gone. But it wasn't destroyed. Its power now resided within him, no longer a force of erasure, but a balancing principle of stillness and silence, the perfect counterpart to his life-giving aura. The chains around Arceus dissolved. The divine Pokémon dipped its head in a gesture of profound, silent gratitude. You have saved us all, my child. You have done what even I could not. You have not defeated the darkness. You have taught it how to sing. The Hall of Origin began to fade. Ash felt himself being gently returned to the mortal world. He found himself back on the summit of Mount Coronet. The black tear in reality was gone. Shiraz lay on the ground, his shadow armor dissolved, leaving him a broken, unconscious man. The shadow constructs had all vanished the moment Ash had achieved equilibrium. His queens were there, battered, exhausted, but alive. Their fallen Pokémon were stirring, the process of their erasure having been reversed the instant the null was balanced. Claire was weeping with joy, her Dragonite, solid and real once more, nuzzling against her. They all stared at him, at the being he had become. He was still Ash. But he was also more. He walked to them, a quiet, gentle smile on his face. The power radiating from him was immense, cosmic, but it was not frightening. It was peaceful. It was the feeling of perfect balance. It's over, he said, his voice the same as always, but now holding the resonance of starlight and silence. They rushed to him. There were no formal bows, no titles. There were hugs, tears, and relieved laughter. Iris punched his arm again, grinning through her tears. Bea gave a nod of respect so deep it was a bow in all but name. Cynthia simply placed a hand on his cheek, her eyes shining with a pride and affection that transcended words. In that moment, they were not a monarch and his aegis. They were a family, forged in the heart of a cosmic war. The story of their victory would never be told. The world would continue on, blissfully unaware of how close it had come to being unwritten. Sheraz would be taken into custody by a secret, international contingent loyal to Diantha, his memory of the Null and the Hall of Origin carefully, surgically removed. He would be remembered as just another failed revolutionary. The story ends not with a wedding, or a quiet retirement, or a happily ever after. It ends on that mountaintop, under the clear, quiet stars. Ash Ketchum, the monarch of creation and entropy, stands with his 8 queens, the strongest trainers in the world, bound to him not by law or title, but by a shared experience that had remade them all. Their battle was won. But their duty as the silent, secret guardians of a new, more stable reality had just begun. And they would face it, as they had faced everything else, together. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.